What's up, everybody? This is Elliott Terrell with artofmagic.com, and you're listening to Magical Thinking. Thanks so much for supporting the show, and I hope you enjoy it. This episode features Paul Wilson, one of my all-time favorite people. He is an incredible magician, author, con artist, sleight of hand expert, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with some of his amazing work. This episode is really special to me. We recorded this on the day that Jim Patton died, and Paul talks about the amazing and enormous influence that Jim had on his life and the way that he approaches the younger generation now. It's really special and it's really touching. And it really says a lot about the character of Paul, I think. He's just one of the sweetest, most encouraging men I've ever known, I've ever met, and I've ever had the pleasure of befriending. We talk about the respect between the generations in magic. We talk about some of Paul's heroes. We talk about filmmaking and how he considers himself a filmmaker. We talk a little bit about the film that he's working on now and his previous films. We talk about the pros and cons of the internet. And at the end is one of my all-time favorite stories about Dave Buck. So you're definitely going to want to listen in to the end because that story is great. It is a long episode, but it's totally fruitful, and I absolutely cannot tell you how much I love this one. A recurring theme in this episode is that you have to have a viewpoint. You have to have something to say, and Paul talks about that in magic, and he also talks about it in filmmaking, and some of the comparisons that he makes are really interesting. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. I have no doubt in my mind that you will. Like I said, it's one of my favorites. If you haven't already, sign up for the newsletter at artofmagic.com and follow us on all the social media channels, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at A Sense of Mystery, and also on Instagram at Treasury of Wonder. Thanks so much for listening to the show. You can email me in at podcast@artofmagic with little tidbits of why you enjoyed it and maybe provide some criticisms or some suggestions that you may have. I also want to mention the awesome theme song that we're using now. Daniel Prado composed this. He arranged it, he recorded it, he did pretty much everything, and I'm so proud of it, and I'm really happy that we have it. I'm indebted to him for doing it for us. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the show. Have fun. I'll talk to you later. Get all cozy. He's gonna bother us throughout the recording.
Come on. Come out. Come here.
Her master's
Good
voice.
boy. Shut.
Yep.
Sure. Cool beans.
Cool beans.
Cool beans!
Alright, Eric, you've got me in a bedroom all alone. What are we going to talk about?
All the secrets of the world. What have you been up to? It's been so long.
Are we recording?
Yes, we are.
You see, you didn't say that. I could have said anything. What have I...
That's the point.
So all of that with Hilton and the little dog, I mean, there was a dog here. We want to be very clear about that we were talking about a little dog.
Do we need to be that clear?
No.
We'll leave it to the imagination.
Yeah, so where were we? And I also said something about being alone in a bedroom with you, which probably shouldn't go out.
That will definitely go out.
I think
it's that kind of thing. Super fun
kind of
and
so,
chill.
What have I been up to? Lots of things. Magic-wise?
I don't care.
I'm not sure I care. Everything's magic. I think.
Yeah.
I love. There's a great saying about magic is good cake and bad bread. Where it's just a good thing to have as a treat, but if you have to earn your living and day to day. So I kind of try and use it as a sort of hinge for everything. So I get to do shows whenever I feel like it. And I don't pursue that kind of thing very often, but it means that it's more fun, and you're always thinking about new stuff or looking for old stuff and trying to play with it and change things. So most of the last couple of years has been playing, filling out my repertoire with stuff that I like, and I'm kind of doing. There's a point when you're doing magic for people, and they're saying, somebody says, I'm going to give you money to come and do a show, so you just all you care about is getting reactions, and so you sort of. You want to fulfill the job aspect of it, whereas I'm at the stage now where I kind of do it as much for myself as you want the audience to have fun. So I'm at that stage where you can kind of explore everything and find what you like. And so for the last couple of years, it's been more about enhancing the stuff I've been doing for years, or finding really old stuff that I want to revive, or exploring things that nobody else is doing. And so I do classic effects, but at the same time I'm doing stuff I think no one else is doing. So that's kind of the magic aspect of it, and coming up with new ideas, but not as many as I used to. I think when I was in my 20s I came up with lots and lots of ideas, and now if something occurs to me, I'll spend a lot of time playing with it, and then wondering what to do with it. It'll go in the show, or it'll maybe go on a little book or a download or something to share it, because that's something I like to do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a funny question though. I'll be honest, it's a funny question. What are you doing in magic? Because it's always there, right?
Yeah.
It's always there. It's just something I'm always doing. It's like, what are you doing with eating?
Yeah. Well, that's a question that you asked. I just said, what have you been up to?
Right. Yeah, but I wanted to define it, because it's like, is this a magic podcast? I don't know.
No.
I haven't heard any.
It's kind of a magic pod. We'll certainly talk about it.
It's really just a podcast, isn't it?
It's really just two guys talking. We're just a couple of fellas talking.
Just a couple of fellas talking in a bedroom. Although
Maybe
we're not
later,
on the bed.
maybe later
we're not
a couple
on the
of
bed.
fellas doing something else.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's Hollywood. Anything can happen.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of define magic a little bit separately. It's always been there, which is
Sure.
great. And so I always find myself thinking about it more and more in different terms. And I think with the film that we did a few years ago, that really made me think about stuff not in a navel gazing, trying to be just, I really want to understand why I really like it, and why I think people that I do it for really enjoy it, and why I really respect other people doing it. So that's kind of the thing. And there's always this thing with magic where I'm always thinking, I'm here sitting talking to you.
Yep.
I'm here and, doing what I'm doing in my life because I picked up a deck of cards when I was 8 years old. And that never goes away. And so obviously you and I know each other because I know you because of magic.
Yes.
But we don't talk magic very much. We always talk about other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of is a funny thing that what are you doing recently? Not very much magic, I think, is the answer to that.
And that's what I wanted to get into.
Well, it's not all directed by magic, but it's all dependent on my love of it, and it all came from my love of it. So yeah, it's a really complicated and kind of long, boring, meandering reply to a very.
That's what I'm here for.
Long and meandering. You got it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm doing a lot of other stuff. Our magic kicked off. I've been wanting to be a filmmaker since I was a kid.
Yes.
And when I was 16, I said at school I want to make movies, and there were no film schools in Scotland that I could see from my high school, which was in a place called Livingston. And I said I want to be a filmmaker. And the very next day I was offered career counselling, not like
this young man wants to be a filmmaker.
But that was it. But that's exactly what it was. It's like, we need to get this guy's head straight.
Yeah.
And I went off and did other things. I was in the army. I went to art school because there was a film course in art school, but it was not like right away. You had to be in film school for a couple of years. I couldn't stand art school. I couldn't stand it, and I couldn't stick it out. And so I ended up going to the army, and then I was a computer programmer, and eventually had a family, and got to a certain point and said, well, I'd really like to go back to doing what I wanted to do when I was 16, and at that point I was 32 years old. And amazingly, my wife got it, and she understood that, because I have a library, a huge library of magic books, but I also have a huge library of film books.
Sure.
And not just history books, but lots of them, and biographies and stuff, but also filmmaking books, which are now very common. They were nowhere near as common even then. And so she kind of supported that, but the only way to do it was to kind of quit this really successful career as a programmer, and then do magic and basically have no money. I mean, we were in a good position to do that, but then Shade came along, and then TV, and we did the Real Hustle and all that stuff for years. Always still wanted to go back and do film, and so there was this point a couple of years ago. None of this is for a question you've asked, but it kind of brings us around.
I'm happy to listen to anything you want to say.
But we stopped doing a Real Hustle, and I kind of wanted to really concentrate on the film thing, and was coming over here to try and figure out how I could take it. And we're here in Hollywood, and I've been coming here for a long, long time.
Sure.
Love it here, but this is a real anthill of people that want to be in this business, and some of them should be in the business and can't.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are in the business and really shouldn't. There's a lot of that in every business. But if you want to join that anthill, then good luck. And some people get the luck they deserve. But I decided to go home and make a short that I wanted to show people. I make a lot of shorts over my time playing with this stuff. So the Magic Box was made, and with Alan Hagen, we made that. We put it out there, and it's been really successful.
It's a beautiful film.
Thank you. And I said, okay, what's next? And we've been making these little films about magic, these little YouTube interview things. And so I was here in this condo and said to these guys, I want to make this film about magic. I don't want to use this as a spine. And they got behind it. And we were talking about what we were going to call it. And I came into this room that we're sitting in right here, where Dave's library was. Mm-hmm. And the very first book I picked off the shelf was called Our Magic. And I walked through and I said, this is it. This is what I'm going to call it. And then we made it, and everybody got behind us. And then the next stage was, well, what's next? And I made a film last year, a feature film, and for very little money, but with amazing talent. So we ended up, great talent behind the camera, great talent in front of the camera, all because the script attracted people.
This was Con Men?
This was Con Men. And we made that. We got amazing help in all levels, including the music and everything. And we showed that in October last year. We did a few screenings at cinemas in Glasgow and a couple in Edinburgh, and that started to bring people out of the woodwork who said, okay, what do you need and what do you want to do next? None of those people are saying, here's all the money you need or anything like that, but they want to help. And so what's happening now, and brings us around to this question, what's happening now is that we're about to start raising money for the next film, which is a low budget feature, but I just met in the last couple of months. I met with a new DP. My DP for Con Men right now is in Afghanistan with the British Army, because he's a territorial, and was called up to go out there. And so I met this guy, Alan McLaughlin, who hit it off right away. We talked about film for hours. Met for 20 minutes and then talked for hours. And he read the script and said, I love it, we definitely want to do it. And I said, yeah, I've got to tell you. I looked around, like as if I was going to tell my best friend I wanted to be Spider-Man or something. When you're a kid, I want to be
Yeah.
And I said, I really want to shoot this on film. And not just because it's a trend, but because it was written with that in mind, with the idea of painting with light, which is one of my favourite books on cinematography, but this idea of using it as a very important element in the story of the film, it just seems to belong on film, having worked with all the digital formats that I've worked with.
Sure. And
I was kind of expecting him to go, you're out of your mind, and you've got no budget. And he went, absolutely, that's what I'm here to tell you. And so, boom.
It all clicked.
All clicked. So I decided to come out here and, do some meetings and see what I could raise out here. And he's flying out. In fact, he should be here in the next hour or two in town. And this week we're meeting over at Panavision. We've got people interested, and it's all starting to take off. So suddenly, even though there's no money yet, we're actually starting to get some momentum.
Yeah.
All of it starting with magic as an 8-year-old kid. All of it, obviously the Magic Box, and then now Our Magic, and then Con Man, and now here. So, that's it. I mean, that's where we're at.
Answering my question. Yeah.
It's kind of weird, and I say it's weird because I don't really understand how any of this stuff works.
Yeah.
And I started noticing all the weird little coincidences, the pieces of kismet,
synchronicities.
The synchronicities, which. I know some people believe in that stuff in a sort of, mystical...
Welcome to the New Age podcast.
Yeah, well, I don't believe in any of that, but I do believe that these things happen anyway, and you can just notice them.
Yes.
And there is a thing about, it's meant to be. Well, all of these meant to be things are great, but maybe we'll never find the money and we'll never make the movie. But I do take this kind of this approach to it. I look at it and I go, you know what? If the movie didn't get made, I've still met Alan. I've still, got this amazing team behind me, and we're still pushing for other things. It's all there anyway. But there are these amazing little coincidences and these little things that have happened. One of the things I didn't know about Alan was when we met and we hit it off on this got an amazing reel. I didn't really dig into the reel because I met him the next day, and he called me and he said, "Great, I've organised this meeting at Panavision with the guy over there." I'm like, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah. I told him about the script, and they're all, wow, fantastic." And then, Alan's film won Sundance last year.
Oh wow!
And Berlin last year. So this guy's
he's
really a talented kid. So you count your blessings and all that kind of stuff, but. I just don't really understand how any of it works and how I got here, because there's an 8-year-old kid inside of me or a 16-year-old kid who's still thinking, wow, look at where
you're doing it, man.
Yeah, but it's hard.
Of course.
You always concentrate on the fact that you still don't have this or you still don't have that, or and I always wonder if if that's the same for everybody, even no matter how far they get, for the Truffauts and the Hitchcocks or for the Tarantinos and the Spielbergs.
Sure.
Are they still thinking, what's going on? Why don't I have this yet? Or something. So I'm in that sort of enjoyable stage right now, and this is still new to me. I've been a director and stuff, but this is still new to me. I get on set and everyone's looking at you, and you go on with a plan and everything, but it's like when you were first doing shows, and that. Do you ever get comfortable?
Yeah.
I don't. The shows, I don't ever get comfortable. I always feel like I didn't do as well as maybe everyone thought I did. I always feel like it wasn't quite that good. And
sure.
I always feel nervous beforehand, and so at the moment it's all fresh and new, and I am 46 years old, and I still makes no sense when I say those words, because it doesn't feel like you're 46-year-olds were very old people when I was young. I'm sure that's as true for some people. But I consider myself a young filmmaker. I consider myself a young producer, because it's all new to me right now.
Sure.
And that way, when I'm talking to younger guys, Alan's a lot younger than I am, and this will veer the conversation off a little bit, right? This will veer the conversation off, but this is maybe interesting.
Yeah, of course.
About all this stuff that happens with us, Magicon, Dan and Dave, you, right? And
yes.
Other guys. I think when I was younger, people of my age could never have related to people of your age or younger, right? The way that we can now.
Yeah.
And maybe a lot of people at my age still can, I don't know. But I think learning how to look up to younger people who have done what they've done is one of the most important developments in creativity, in artistic endeavors, right? I really, really do. And I think when I realized I was comfortable with that I'd meet a young guy and he'd do something amazing. And
you're not threatened by it.
Yeah, because you can be. And, it'll happen with anything. It'll happen before, even though I say it now, it could happen, But, when you see a kid who's, 12 years old doing amazing second deals that I never could do when I was 12 or 22, I actually was, wow, this is amazing. Come and see this guy. I'm really proud of myself for that. I can still tell you all the times I wouldn't be proud of myself. Where I was like, it's very good, but you should maybe... And that's me hearing those people when I was a kid,
sure,
who would try and fence you in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been really important, because that's what I'm doing now, and there's so many younger guys who've done so much more than me, and I look up to them really. And I was a point where I realized that age was not a factor.
Yeah.
That came from the magic community and from the cardistry community especially.
Yeah.
Because that interaction, and it all goes back to, I've talked about it before, that first Magicon, where there was this really, you were at the first Magicon.
I was not.
Were you not? No. Oh, it was really special. Yeah, you really missed.
I know.
You missed something special. It's a real shame. And you should really feel bad about it.
I do. I feel every day.
A very good cry.
Yes.
But the first Magicon was special for a very important reason, and I remember when I noticed it. When we got there, first of all, you realise I'm one of the older guys. Right? That was one of the first times I was like, oh crap, I'm one of the older guys. can I swear on this thing?
Yeah.
I didn't say crap, I said, fuck.
Yes.
I want it. And I was with another friend of mine, and we were like, damn, we were the old guys, right?
Yeah.
And there's all these kids, and they're all sitting on the floor, and they're all doing flourishes, a lot of them are doing flourishes. Some of them are doing expert card moves brilliantly well at a point that, you know, I would never have imagined, right? And you're walking around this, you know, like, you know, in my imagination now it's like landmines where you're stepping between these kids who are doing second deals and bottom deals and amazing flourishes. But all the speakers were kind of our generation mostly, right? And it's like, this is going to be a disaster. Seriously. I mean, this is going to be a disaster. I mean, how am I going to talk to these guys? Well, I was here to talk about, you know, my thing. And Weber got up at the very beginning of the thing, and he said, I'm going to tell you something, and you'll either know it now or you'll know it later, and you'll understand it. And it's whoever tells the best story wins. That's what he said.
Yeah. And
immediately, the entire convention, without any conscious decision, became about story. And all of us who were speaking leaned towards that idea of story. And it became very special. But the thing that really, the moment where I realized something important was happening was when I looked out and all these kids had cards in their hand, they were flourishing, they were dealing into their lap, and they were paying full attention. And they were absorbing everything. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized this is the first time we've all really connected, two generations connecting. And I think before then, the idea of flourishing, right? You know, Dan and Dave will tell you that there's a definite snootiness about it, right? There's a definite looking down your nose about it. And there's a reason for that, not a necessarily entirely bad reason, but the actual expression of it I thought was very bad. I didn't like the fact that, you know, people would dismiss people for just doing flourishes because they could also do magic. The good thing is that yes, flourishes and magic can conflict with one another. That's definitely true.
Of course.
But they can also exist together in the same space. And there's great footage of Scarney doing magic and cheating, right? Mm-hmm. Cheating, by the way, just like flourishing, I'm doing second deals and now I'm going to do magic. Well, you can do anything. I saw you do all the second deals.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but he got up and in the middle of this demonstration, he had it nicely segmented. It was presented so that you saw the skill and the magic separately. But in the middle of it, he said he did some flourishes, old school flourishes up the arm.
Sure.
He says, here's some things I did in my youth. And I thought, wow, that's how to do it, right? And so this scene in MagicCon really was, I thought, exciting. And that's when I got to meet all these guys that I really think are really interesting right now. And, you know, Maddie Gilbert, I met Maddie at that for the first time.
Sure.
Which is not only an exciting guy, he's also a very dear friend now, you know. So it was a really interesting thing, and I do think that, you know, whatever happens with me in this career I'm trying to pursue right now, it's founded in my relationships that I built in this world, where I can, you know, relate to and learn from anybody. I do genuinely seek out the old men of magic, right? I mean, I'm the old man of anything. I'm interested. Sure. And always have been like that. You know, if you ever spend a lot of time with your grandparents, I did, my entire youth was spent amongst my grandparents. You do think, okay, I want to learn as much as I can. But when you suddenly realize that there's a two-way street here, and the really smart old guys of the past, including Vernon, I think. I mean, I could be wrong. The reason they surrounded themselves with these, because it was a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
And there's definitely a tradition in magic, and I think in all things, of being threatened by the up-and-comers, right? That created these barriers, and, you know, you fence people in and you say, oh, how dare you go and do that when you're only 22? And there was that thing, and I suffered from it. I had people who did that to me, actually. Mm-hmm. But I think that, you know, it's so exciting to kind of do what you want to do at any age and just do it anyway. I wish I was doing it when I was 24, but I'll be honest, I don't think I would have anything to say when I was 24 like I think I do now. I think I've got something to say, and that came later in life, and for some people it does. But the really cool guys that I looked up to them because they kind of reciprocated that respect. And I was talking about him today, and a lot of guys won't know him. There was a card magician called Rovi, R-O-V-I. Ivor was his original name.
Okay.
And I remember I saw him do a lecture, and he was very charming, very funny, and completely amazing. I mean, really fooling stuff. And I gravitated to this guy because, he could fool you without apparently doing any sleights, right?
Sure.
And as much as I'm big into sleight of hand and cheating and stuff, at an early age, there was a guy called Len Edwards, right? And again, nobody will probably know him unless they came from Edinburgh. But I went to an Edinburgh Magic Circle Open Day, and it was in a golf club, and it was, in a bar, right? And people would sit around. It wasn't just for magicians; it was for their family and for anyone else who wanted to come.
Sure.
And I went to this thing, and there were 2 rounds of applause circling the room. So guys were doing magic at the tables, and it wasn't that great, right? But there were 2 guys everyone was really reacting to. And one of them was Len Edwards, who was doing no sleight of hand. And he would say that, I'm not one of you, you look at me and say, I'm not one of you whiz kids. That's exactly what he said. I'm not one of you whiz kids. And then he basically would proceed to beat me up without doing anything. I had no idea what he was doing. And I always remember that feeling, and Len Edwards was a real influence on me. But the other guy that was going around the room was a guy I ended up spending a few years with. It was a guy called Walter Sonny Day. And he was an older guy, and probably 60s at the time, and he looked like a caricature of the devil. With his beard, and I've got a pointy beard right now, but he really had his chin and his features, and he was quite withdrawn because he suffered from anorexia nervosa.
Okay.
And he had been in a terrible car crash. Mm-hmm. And there was another card magician, a very well-known card magician in the crash with him, who told me a lot about it. I don't want to say his name because I don't know how private that is. But
sure.
They were in this bad car crash coming back from a convention, and as a result, he had ended up suffering from anorexia nervosa. So the only thing he ever ate was madeleines, which are these little French cakes, these little sponge cakes. So when I went to see him, he would bring out tea and madeleines, and it's the only thing I ever saw him eat, ever.
Okay.
Right. And yesterday, when I was with Dave and we went to Starbucks, whenever I see madeleines, I always buy them and eat them, and so I had them yesterday.
Oh wow!
Because I was thinking of Sonny, and I was talking about him this morning. And I had breakfast this morning with Jim Steinmeier, which still freaks me out. I get to sit and talk.
I get to sit here and listen to you.
Well, you say that, but I'm like, wow, this guy read everything, and we're just chatting for breakfast. I was telling him about Sonny Day. I'm going to tell you about it. There's no format to this, right?
Yeah, tell me.
So Sonny was going around the room and was just fooling the hell out of everybody. When I saw him, I was blown away. Did amazing stuff. And he did the coins around the room, which was coins to glass. But the only thing he did that was different, his method was very good, but the only thing that was really different was, instead of the coins going from hand to hand and dropping a glass, they left the left hand and went left around the room, and then until they arrived and he caught them on his right hand in the glass. So when you think about it, that makes the effect like 100 times bigger.
Yeah. That's huge.
Try it. Now, you want to get, if you're a magician thinking, oh my god, I wish Paul would talk about magic, this is all very boring, and you do coins to glass, and instead of saying, look, they go from hand to hand but they land in the glass, instead of you say, I'm going to make it leave this hand, go around the room, all the way over, here it comes, and then catch it in that glass, the effect is so much bigger because the concept is so much bigger.
Yes.
Right? If you get nothing else magically from this podcast, trust me, that's going to make
this is
day.
worth it right here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And so he did that. He did this trick where he had a penny and a cent. Right, and we're in Scotland, I remember. I had a penny and a cent, and he says, "What's in my hand? The penny or the cent? The penny or the cent?" And it's an old trick, right? And finally, he makes you say, "Well, if you take out this, it must be a cent." And he says, "Yes." And he turned his hand over, and there was a perfume bottle, scent, right? But not just a little like a big perfume bottle with a big rubber squeezer hanging off of it, and it just made you go, "Wow!" And he did Spellbound as well. And it was, copper to silver, then copper to jumbo coin, then jumbo coin to a tray which he turned over and had drinks on it.
What?
Seriously. Right? That made you just leap up out of your chair. And it's unbelievable. So one of the things he did was he did a vanishing die trick, okay, where he put 2 dice in his hand and he shook them, and they vanished, and it was an amazing illusion. And I said, Tony, you got to teach me this. You don't want to learn that. I really do. No, and for months he just tormented me, and he would do it over and over again. And these things were gone, right? They were gone. And when they shook his, so I begged him. Finally, one day, he said, "Okay, if you really want to learn it, I'm going to teach it to you. You want to learn it? I said, yeah, okay, so I need to get something." And he went out, and he used to live in a shop, and it was a shop with all the windows were boarded up, right?
Okay.
The toilets were public bathrooms nearby.
Okay.
And it sounds like he was living in squalor, but it wasn't. It was very clean, except it was full of stuff, books and pamphlets and manuscripts. But the main shop area was like piled high, and the only place that's come close to it in terms of layout, in terms of having stuff everywhere and a little pathway to walk through, was Jerry Andrus's house,
okay,
right? Which we'll talk about later. If you know. So, in this shop in the back, we would sit in session for hours and hours. Now I was a teenage kid, and I have to be honest, like a little old guy that looks like the devil, going into his window boarded up shop and talking about magic. You know, I mean, yeah, I don't know if I'd be happy with my kids doing this,
no.
right? But there was nothing like that. It just still weirds me out. Anyway, he said, I got to get something, and he goes out to this outside shop area where there's just tons of junk.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't junk. He had projects, printing projects, and he would bind books and weird stuff. He came back with a big hammer, and he said, "Okay, open your mouth as wide as you can." And he held the hammer up, and I stared at him. What? And he opened his mouth, and he detached his false teeth from the gums,
mm-hmm.
and he shook his jaw, and it sounded exactly like 2 dice.
Oh God!
So what he had done is he would say, "Watch," and he would detach these and put it in, and he was shaking his chin very slightly, creating this perfect sound of 2 dice in the hand. I mean, perfect. And that's how it was done. Wow. Needless to say, I didn't let him knock out all my teeth. And I hope I never have to be able to do that trick. But so he was a very interesting guy. And he was, an older guy who was really interested in what I was interested in. So when I said, I've got an idea for a coin trick, he would really work on it with you. And then he would ask you questions, well, why do you want to do it like that? Why do you do 2 moves? Why can't you do 1? And, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So he instilled in me a very solid appreciation for less moves, but for direct methods, So even if it meant doing something really difficult to get the effect, that's fine. Only if that's the most direct way to get the effect. Sure. And Roy Walton too, we'll talk about him. And the other thing that Sonny did, which I think is still one of my favourite tricks of all time, I was talking about this morning with Jim. He did a cabaret piece at one of these magic circle events for the public, and he came out, and there was a microphone stand, and there was a little guy, and he came out, and he was going to do cards to pocket or some, stand-up cards routine, and the microphone was way too high for him. He couldn't reach it, and so he's trying to talk, and the microphone's too high, and he tried to adjust it, but he wouldn't adjust. So he called out to the wings, and 2 guys came out from the wings and lifted him up at the elbows so he would reach the microphone. So he's now a couple of feet off the ground. Sure. And he then dismissed them, and they left him levitating in space to continue the routine, right? Which he did.
That's amazing.
And the method was that he had built that microphone stand out of metal, and there was a female notch, a hole. Sure. And one of his shoes had a metal plate in it with the male end of the notch that went in, and it worked because he had anorexia. And he weighed almost nothing. Wow. Nobody else could do this trick. Sure, right? Sure. And it just blew me away that he used his condition as a method. And that's what he told me. He says, "Well, I had anorexia." I was thinking, how could I use that? What? This, blew me away. Really, really did blow me away. I still miss him. I mean, he died 88 or 87. I can't remember. I was still quite young. I was in the army when he died, so it must have been 88 or 89. And he just was, again, he was this really cool older guy, and he was a magician that no one's really ever heard of. But I'll tell you, I've met all the best magicians in the world. He was way up there, and he wasn't alone. There were other guys I met, that, again, Dave Campbell from Scotland, who was this amazing thinker and a really good performer. I only ever saw him perform in pubs and things like that. He was a really good performer, very charming, really fooling, did all this magic. And I met him, I'd heard of him. I was a young guy, and I'd met him, and he showed me some magic, and we talked, and he said, well, next time I see you, I'll bring you my notes. And I didn't see him for maybe a year, and he brought me his notes.
Wow.
And just because he remembered, and I was, I wish I was like that. I'd always forget things like that. And he just was really nice, really charming, and so obviously he died, and they did his book, and I did all the illustrations for the book because I wanted to repay the compliment of giving me his notes.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the Legacy of Dave Campbell book published by International, and if you want really commercial, really clever ideas, most people don't even know it exists. And that guy is as good as many of the magicians I've ever met, but most people have never heard of him. And again, older guy, much older guy. And when I look back, it really was hanging out with those guys that made me, think about magic in a more artistic sense, but also in a more complex sense. I really kind of thought about it more than I would have if I didn't have that. And I think Aaron Fisher always likes to talk about, well, maybe not now because he's changed, but we used to talk about this, about having no mentor.
Mm-hmm.
He had Jack Berman, and Harvey Rosenthal was another influence on him. And we had these guys, I had Gordon Bruce as well, and you looked up to them because they were really, really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
But as it turns out, they weren't just really good because I was young or inexperienced. They're really, really, really good, right?
Yeah.
And we got very lucky in our choice of mentors. And the great one for me being, Roy Walton. Couldn't give me a list of all the great card magicians available, and I couldn't have made a better choice if I had the choice of everybody. Really got lucky. And there's a thing happening now where you got all these people. We've got YouTube, and we've got all these ways that bring people into magic. But I don't think, even though they could be very talented and very skillful, I don't think they're getting the same value from that I got from knowing all those older guys, and also being surrounded by a scene, where Jerry Sadowitz was kind of in there before me, and Peter Duffy was, so I was able to learn from those guys, and Neil Smith, who a lot of guys probably never heard of, but Neil Smith was a really gifted card magician, and we would sort of be hanging out and talking, and we were that level, right? Mm-hmm. And then above us was the Steve Hamiltons and the Douglas Camerons, and amazing scene we had until everybody fell out, which is the curse of magic, the thing. So, as an older guy, 46 doesn't feel old. I'll tell you that if anybody's interested. It doesn't feel old. I don't think I'm old. I've got two young sons who are way, way smarter than I am. And I'm not saying that just because they're my kids, because they really are. And they're like a reminder of they were just babies a minute ago, and now they're these really high functioning kids. And so you don't feel like even though you've got these kids and you think, oh my god, I can't believe I'm a father to these kids, you don't feel like you're 46, but I think you would if you had created those barriers, right? Does that make any sense?
Yes.
I think you try and think, you shouldn't be going out there and trying to make movies like
You're not separated from youth. You're embracing it, and it keeps you young.
Oh yeah, keeping it in mind, because it's an important thing. You have to consider your mortality, and I think the reason that I'm leaning that way in this discussion is I just learned today that Jim Patton died. So yeah, we'll maybe talk about him in a bit. So, yeah.
I had the immense pleasure of meeting him once at MagicCon.
Yeah.
And just sitting near him and
Mhm.
hearing him talk, because I, when I went to those conventions, I was trying to find the old guys to sit down with and zip my mouth and just listen and stuff.
Like me.
Like
guys
you.
like me.
Yeah, yeah,
wow,
yeah.
thanks.
Well, you had that beard.
Yeah.
But it just, he was just the coolest. You just saw him walk around and like, even if you didn't know who he was, you were like, I want to go be near that guy.
I mean, he was the coolest. And he is the coolest. You know, he just was... He didn't have to try, which was kind of good. And he was absolutely one of us. I mean, he was absolutely one of us. And it was... I kind of remember trying to convince him, are you going to come down and go to this MagicCon? Oh, I don't know. You know, and, I might go antiquing with Judy. I remember saying, I said, you got to come down. And that first MagicCon, he was one of the guys who were, he's like, these kids are really good. I remember him saying that. And he, I, and Tony Cabral. And I never met Tony Cabral at this point, but God, I loved him. He was really one of that old school card, guy, and I like to call him old school card monster. It's just this, really good at everything.
Yes,
and really, into the refinements and we were that particular MagicCon was, Jim had left LA. He'd been in the LA scene for so long. As a barman at the castle, and he decided he had had enough of that, and he wanted to go down and he's driving up every day from Orange County, right? So that meant I wasn't seeing him anywhere near as much. And he came down to MagicCon, and we saw this scene. We saw these guys are serious. These young guys are really good, and they really want to know. They're not just surface scratchers, right? These guys really want to know, and it was a good feeling. Really good feeling. And another old guy that was there was J.C. Wagner, who at that point we knew we were going to lose within the next year at that point because he was very ill. And we were sitting outside the hotel, which is the Hilton down there. And we said, why don't we go across to Coronado Island and see J.C.? And I'd never seen J.C. in the bar. So the three of us are sitting there, me and Tony and Jim. And who came with us? Was it Tom Frank? I'm really embarrassed to say I've blanked it, but I think... Anyway, we all got on the little ferry, and we went over and went into the little club, and it's this little dark hole of a place. And there's JC, right? And he's behind the bar, he's serving, he's a barman. And there wasn't really anybody there to do magic for other than us, so we had a lovely, lovely day, and we were about to get up and leave, and then like a dozen lay people walked in.
Oh, wow.
And we all sat down again.
Yeah.
And JC just destroyed. And it was great, absolutely great. And we came back on a high, on that little boat ride coming back. We were all on a high. And a couple of days later, I was having dinner with a couple of guys, and JC was sitting right beside me, and I said to him, the bunnies. He opened with the bunnies, right? Which is a super strong trick.
Oh, yeah.
You opened with the bunnies? I mean, it sounds like way too strong. He says, no, open with the bunnies. I mean, you set the tone, and everything feels as good as that. And he says, where do you do it? And I said, I don't do the bunnies. He goes, bunnies. And he took my arm and he said, you must. What? We're talking about little bunny trick, right? I said, you must do the trick with a bunny. I'm like, but why? He says, it's a kind of hackney trick. Everybody does it. And he says, you're not doing it for you. They love it. You got to do it for them. And so now, when I do it, I don't do it as often as I should. I did it a few weeks ago in a show. So I kind of tend to do the shows with surrounded, big tables surrounded by people. One show, maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And I tell the story of JC, and I said, my friend JC Wagner, and before he died, I had this conversation with him, and there's a trick called the bunnies, and I described this thing, and he says, you must do it. And they listen, and I bring out a bunny, and I say, well, for my friend, JC, I'd like to do this trick for you. And I make out that I'm really not interested in this trick. I'm doing it for my friend.
Yeah.
And so I go, okay, here we go. And I bring out the little first bunny, and I put it on the table. And somebody always, a woman usually, says, oh, when they see a little bunny, And I say, shut up. let's just get through this.
Yeah.
And I do the trick, and then when the little bunnies appear, you get the big reaction. I've got this little bag, and secretly in the bag, it's stuffed with little bunnies, right? So I grab a couple off the table, and I put them back in the bag. What I'm really doing is grabbing fistfuls of other ones, and I'm letting them go as I'm apparently trying to pick them up. And now the table is filling with bunnies. As I say, could you grab a few of these? And they're really funny bit, and it's become a really personal thing. But it all came from that trip to Cornwall Island, and from seeing JC, and from, if you're not a magician listening to this, you're thinking, this is a stupid story about little sponge bunnies, right?
Yeah.
But what he was saying was, this is an experience that people get a big kick out of. I mean, adults we're talking about. I do it for kids too, but magic is not something we solely do for ourselves. I mean, sometimes you've got to remember the audience has things that they like, and you've got to give them that. And coming out and just doing, esoteric card magic, or just doing, arty presentations.
Yeah, it's very self-fallacious.
At some point, you got to do, you got to sing an anthem. You got to get everyone to light their little lighters and
the greatest
hold their hands up. So you got to do that kind of stuff. And but Jim, I won't talk too much about Jim, only because I really am still,
Sure, of course.
I mean, it's only a year ago that Dean left, and I drove past his old shop yesterday, and I'm not a crier. I'm one of those guys that doesn't, unless I'm watching certain movies.
Sure.
There's a couple that will always get me, but I mean, I spoke to Jim recently, and he told me he had lung cancer and he lost a lung and all this stuff. But it really came out of the blue today. But Jim, when he was at the castle, it was just this scene that grew around him. And, me and Aaron, I still sleep on Aaron's couch. I was like at one point, a welcome friend and then an unwelcome squatter, right? But, we would go up and we would just hang out at Jim's bar, which is now Mike Pisciotta's bar. So, which is great because it belongs with a great magician behind the bar.
Yeah.
But we would go up, and Jim would get these vats of chili. The Magic Castle chili would come down, and it was $5 a bowl or something, and he was supposed to serve it to guests. And he would maybe sell 2 bowls in a night, but it would be empty because me and Aaron would go and empty. We'd just eat for free, right? He'd give us free, and we'd buy a drink, but I don't know how we'd all get so drunk on that one drink because he kept topping it up, And so it was a real scene, and we'd hang out down there and talk magic and make fun of each other and other people, of course.
Of course.
And it was a really great scene, and he really was a connoisseur. So if you showed him a sleight that was really clever, he would think about it for hours, and he would really appreciate it, and he'd laugh, and he'd have all that stuff. And, he was a big kid. He was a kid right till the end, He was stylish, I mean, this guy, you put clothes on this guy, I mean, he immediately looked like good, He always wore Ralph Lauren, right? That was his thing. He always wore that. That's nothing else. And he was the only guy I ever thought looked cool with a pipe, right? Even though fuck pipes and fuck smoking, because he died, right? And
but he sure pulled it off.
He pulled it off, and he used to say to me, "Oh, you're coming from London. Could you go to this tobacco shop and get me this special blend of tobacco?" And I said, "Jim, I won't do it. I refuse to support smoking because." I'm very happy the day that I didn't, but he just was a cool guy, and he was a surfer, right? So he had youth in his veins. I mean, and he was a surfer right up to just a couple of years ago. He would go down to the beach, and even if he wasn't surfing, he'd go down and come back and assess. These kids today, they don't understand, But he was part of the scene, and guys knew him, like really famous surf guys knew him, and so. He's an inspiration for that, it doesn't end when you get to 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70, and I think Vernon was the inspiration to him for that, where, he was still this guy who was living his life to the full. And I'm sure this has all become very circuitous and very, labyrinthine to try and get to this point, but he definitely exemplified that, never lose the thrill of it, never lose the joy of it, right? And when I think about these guys that are passing away right now, Dean Dill, passed away last year, and you know, now we've just lost Jim, and you know, it's really, these guys are leaving too young, no matter what their age.
Yeah.
You know, Vernon died, you know, he was still too young. He felt like he had more to do.
Yeah.
And I think if you can die with that, no matter what age, you know, if it felt like you weren't done yet, you know, that leaves people something to do.
Yeah.
For you, right? A little passing of the torch. So yeah, today it's funny. I just found myself talking about this, and it wasn't conscious at all. But I know it's because, you know, I found out about that today, and it's still sinking in. I mean, you know, it's annoying me because last time I was here, I didn't go down and see him, and I should have. But then, you know, that's always going to be the case. You know,
yeah.
So yeah, and you know. So yeah, if you go back to that original question, you know, how have you been or what have you been doing? It all kind of comes around to that. Everything is put into sharp relief by the news today of, you know, of something ending, but you know, everything that I'm doing is kind of inspired by him and the other elements around it.
Yeah.
I'm sure none of this is useful. This is all making no sense.
This is all the point.
Yeah,
this
maybe.
is the juice.
Maybe. It's a shame I'm driving, or I'm telling you we should be drinking whiskey right now. I mean,
we will do it again, and we will drink whiskey.
Yeah, I think, you know, we have to be, you know, I've spent long, I remember Jim just wanted to, I'm going to make sure what stories you can tell me. It's all right. But Jim just wanted to, one day he kind of had enough of magician bullshit, right? Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk about it too much, but it's the stuff we all know. Right?
It's the petty
bullshit. Yeah. And I've gone through it, and I've been guilty of it, and so have you, I'm sure. And so is everybody listening to this, right? But there's a point where you start realizing it's not helping, and it's not doing anybody any good, and you know, we have to stop indulging it. And he had kind of been seeing a lot of it at the castle, and part of it revolved around me, and part of it revolved around other guys that we loved and knew. And it was putting off magic. It was putting off the scene, and it was making it unpleasant to be around. Yeah. Right. You have to remember, he also worked at the castle. He didn't have any choice. He had to do that, right? Yeah. So he just said, "You know what? Fuck it. Let's go to Aaron's." And Aaron was out of town. I was staying at Aaron's house, and we went to Aaron's, and we stopped, and he bought a bottle of whiskey, and I mean a big bottle of whiskey, Glenfiddich it was. And we went into that room, and we just came out a day later. You know, I mean, I've never really done that. I mean, I'm not a drinker. I'm not a particularly good drinker. When I was in the army, I once bought a bottle of whiskey and was drinking it at New Year's. I was in the forces. I wasn't on duty, obviously, and somebody had to take it away from me because I was drinking it, like, you know, and I really was careful with alcohol after that because I almost killed myself drinking an entire bottle of whiskey. Yeah. So that was the only other time where I'd gone through so much alcohol in a short period of time. Yeah. And he just wanted to get into a room, close the doors, he put a deck of cards between us, and we just, you know... Yeah. And it was amazing. It was great. It was. I didn't want to repeat it because I don't drink well. I'm not a great drinker. But for him, it was just this massive relaxation. And you know, we slept on couches and chairs, and we walked down to Denny's and came back and had a glass of whiskey. And you know, and then that night we both were back in the castle. You know, and we kind of let go of all that junk that had happened. And that was a really great session. I couldn't tell you any magic I came up with or saw or thought of or discussed that day because it was just about, you know, that, you know, two guys just, you know, drinking and getting that shit off our shoulders. You know, it was really one of those things. I felt so privileged that one of those old school card guys wanted to have an old school card session with me. And I don't recommend it, by the way. If you have an old school card session, you don't have to have an entire bottle of whiskey there and drink it all, because we drank it all.
Of course. It would be wasteful not to.
Yeah, it would. But, you know, it was just really, really great. And you know, I don't know if Aaron's listening to this, but I'm thinking of you today, buddy, because, you know, I'm sure you're hurting today too. Because Jim was really special. You know, he really was. He was flawed. I mean, I'm not going to talk about his flaws, but you know, he used to. I once sat with him, and he did like 20 mugs. None of them were good. None of them were good. And I had to keep telling him, I'm really sorry, but I can see that. And he's like, oh, damn it, he did another one, damn it, he did another one. And then about half an hour later, it was all kind of uncomfortable because, you know, I was trying to be honest. I didn't want to say, well, actually, that one looks good when it didn't.
Yeah.
Because then he'd bust you on that, right?
Yeah.
And then he was just sitting playing with one, and it looked brilliant. And I was like, well, what's that one? And he said, oh, this one's no good. I said, well, that one looks really good. And he was getting upset and angry. And he was really cool. So he had this kind of, you know, gnarly thing. But he was honest as you could get in terms of that. You know, he was really a friend, and, you know, he would speak to you about things, you know, and just sort of a father-like in a way, you know. And,
sure.
You know. So he told me some great stories. One of my favourite stories about him was with Larry Jennings. And Larry liked to drink, right? So Larry would have some drinks, and then the next day he'd say, I was thinking of this thing, and whose is this? And Jim said, well, it's mine. I showed that to you last night, Larry. Oh, wrong. Okay. Well, what about this? And he showed this. So, well, actually, I showed you that as well, Larry. He says, well, damn it, Jim, you can't have them both. You know? And, you know, so he used to tell all these great stories, and he used to know all these really... He was around it all, and he was a really integral part of it all. And then I used to kind of marvel at the fact that a lot of the enthusiasts of magic were just kind of... He was just a barman, or, you know, he was just there. And I wondered if that was the same for Vernon. You know, these people would come in, they wanted to be great magicians, and Vernon was just there, and they took him for granted, maybe.
Yeah.
That definitely happened with Jim, you know, that he was taken for granted. But, you know, when I was at the castle, if Jim was there, I was right beside Jim, right, always. And so were the other smart guys like Aaron and so forth. So, you know, I think that's one of the most important things about magic, is that we can cross the generations now, and we can share. And when that's happening, both sides benefit in the most wonderful and magical ways, right? And when it's not happening, when you're seeing the barriers being put up, then everybody's losing. So, you know, I think Jim Patton and Dean Dill and, you know, Sunny Day and all these guys that I've learned from and been very fortunate to be around. And still am around, you know, I mean, Roy Walton's in his 80s, and I don't think if anybody met him, they would ever guess he was near his 80s. He's really, you know, he's one of those guys that's got youth pouring out of him, you know, and he's got just the most amazing outlook on life and magic. And, you know, I mean, I every time I go see him, I still feel like a little kid. You know, I can't show him a trick. Never been able to show Roy a trick without thinking, you know, feeling comfortable. You know? But he's always there at the moment, and, you know, every time I'm home, I'm trying to make sure I get in one day at least to see Roy, and you know, it's still there. And wherever you are, I mean, if you're a magician listening to this right now, those guys maybe are still around, you know. And, you know, Aaron reached out to Jack Berman and said, I want to have lessons. And I think Jack, I don't know how many he charged him for, but it wasn't a lot. As soon as he realized he was serious, you know, he stopped charging this kid, because and of course he became Aaron Fisher, who's, you know, very talented and, you know, very good thinker, and a very, you know, very important contributor to modern card magic.
Sure. Because
an old guy and a young kid are sitting in a room together, and that's the way it works. So somehow that's at the heart of everything I'm thinking about today, just because of Jim. And it's happening all over, you know. I think when you see it not happening, there's two aspects to it, and I think there's a really creative outlook where you take a kid who doesn't know anything, so he doesn't know what he can't do, and can come up with all sorts of great stuff, and sort of, you know, becomes his own creative body ball of energy, sort of within a vacuum, you know, and you see that coming out every now and again. But that's kind of rare. Mostly you see people who are just doing stuff they've learned online. Sure. So I'm wondering how all of this, the podcasts, the internet, how we can maybe break those barriers down a little bit and make more access to, the guys out there like the Jim Pattons that are still around, and instead of creating those vacuums, or worse, creating a community of really talented magicians who don't connect with that generation, or don't connect with the books, right? Yeah. Which we could talk about for a long time. A lot of guys who are really good have never read a book, but they're still really good. Sure. Right? But if we can get them to read books and discover that stuff that's buried in the books, and then maybe take those talents and apply it to those, we're all going to benefit. I mean, they're going to benefit, we're all going to benefit. So there are things that need to be done in magic. And so I just said at the beginning of all this how, that's kind of, a lot of the things I'm doing are not really magic based, and yet it's ingrained in everything that I think about. Of course. And I think of myself very much as a magician, but not necessarily always as a conjurer. One of the things I started doing recently is I picked up, I was at art school and I was into portraiture and I loved drawing. So I just thought I'm going to go back to that and I'm going to start drawing again, and just to see if that helps fire off those neurons that have been dead for 20 years or whatever. But it all helps the creative process. And we talk about polymaths, we talk about Renaissance men and that type of thing, or women, and you see that that's one of the things about the new generation of magicians that excite me the most, is they're not limited to conjuring, they're doing other things. Mm-hmm. Right? That's really important, I think. And absolutely. I think that's really exciting. And I think that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to become part of that by having the guts and the bravery, and not just me, I'm backed up by my wife. My wife has to take those risks too. Of course. Otherwise, everything falls apart, and your kids have to take that risk too by supporting you, and your family, your dog, right? I mean, so it's not just like I'm breaking out and I'm on my own. Yeah. It's a different experience for me than it would be for you even. Yeah. So it's, I don't want to ramble. I've got this automatically don't ramble thing, but I'm rambling.
Turn that off.
Yeah, I know.
You ramble as much as you want.
But there is this kind of really great thing about all of this stuff that I've been talking about so far, that if I'm sitting here processing it, I begin to wonder if I would be doing this if I wasn't inspired by Dan and Dave, right? Mm-hmm. Sure. Who I love dearly. I mean, really, as people, apart from anything else, as people, right? And and you.
Thank you.
New people that I'm meeting all the time. Lauren, who I think's great. I mean, she's really an interesting person. Ning Kai. Ning Kai's a really interesting person. You should. I'll connect you with Ning Kai. Okay. Who's kind of an inspiration as well, because she was a professional illusionist working with J.C. Sum, and they were like a double act, and traveling the world lecturing and doing shows and being on TV and doing all that. And then she decided, well, actually I'd like to write, and I'd like to travel more, and I'd like to focus on the things that interest me and be a model, right? She's a beautiful girl, obviously, but she's a beautiful person on top of all that. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you put a sheet over her, you could feel her charisma, right? She's one of those people. Mm-hmm. And when she kind of broke away to do all of that stuff, it's been incredibly successful, because it's kind of so natural in her as a person that that's what she should be doing. Mm-hmm. And I look at that. She's one of the people that I've always got in my mind thinking, yes, this is possible. I can make films, and I don't want to make films because I want to have I don't. Sure. Not because of the stuff that. There are two different types of filmmaker, right? There's people who want to be a filmmaker and make films, and that's what you want to think about all the time. Mm-hmm. And there's people who want to say they're a director, right? Yeah. Now we've all got that in us. I've got that in me, right? But I literally am not doing this if nobody watches my films, I can still make them. I made them for me, and hopefully for the people around me who work with me, and we're all proud of it, right? You know, I can look at anything I've made up to date and say, well, I could have done this and I could have done that, but I couldn't because I didn't have those resources, or I didn't have those talents at that point. Right? I didn't have those skills at that point. So generally speaking, at the moment, knock on wood, I am very, very happy with what I've done so far, and not just under the conditions that I made it, but in and of itself, I'm very happy. And I hope to always be happy and not just do something for money and stuff. But the endeavour, I really wanted to do this, and I still want to do it. And I don't care really if you like it or not. I want you to. But I'm doing it because I feel it's the right thing to do, and I think I've got something to say. And I look at people and I think Ning is definitely one of the people that makes me think, yes, if it's the right thing to do, it'll work out. You know? And so long as I can put bread on the table, I don't have to be a billionaire or a millionaire or anything like that. As long as I'm fortunate enough to do what I enjoy doing, and hopefully will be good at, right? And looking around and surrounding myself by people who do these things in different endeavors, right? But do these things, you know, it really is helpful. It really is inspiring. And the more I think about it, the more I think about the inspiration that comes from this generation of magicians and creators. And there's, you know, I hate the whole hipster culture thing. Right? I hate it. But no,
says the man with round spectacles.
Round spectacles and a pointy beard. But I hate it because people assume I'm part of it, right? And I'm wearing an Apple Watch. But it isn't the...
Who calls himself a filmmaker?
Who calls himself a filmmaker, right? But it isn't.
Yes.
But it isn't the. It's the hipster culture label that I hate.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are some people who embrace that.
That's what they want to be, just like someone likes to say they're a filmmaker.
But there are people who just enjoy that life and indulge in it, and you know, they don't just say it's artisan because that's a cool word and it's a good label. Yeah. They do it because they really like to do it, and they really care about it. And you feel that passion. So there are the people who feel that passion and the people who want the lifestyle part of it, right? Yeah. The hipster lifestyle. They want to do it as a... And next year they'll do something else because that's the lifestyle that's attractive, or that's the fashion or whatever. So I feel like I'm part of it, but not because of this. And I like this. I like my beard and I love my glasses.
I think it looks great. Yeah, your glasses.
And awesome. I don't have any hairstyling options on the top of my head, right? This is the only one I've got, so I'll take what I can get. But I do. It's easy for people to dismiss you with that label. Yes. Right? And just say, oh, well, it's just, a bunch of hipster bullshit, right? Or whatever. And yet, there's plenty of hipster bullshit, and I can feel it, and I can sense it, and I can hate it. Mm-hmm. But when I come across somebody who just loves what they're doing, it flows, right?
It's so energizing and fulfilling, Yeah,
and it's that guy who, is the filmmaker with his collar up, driving around, and hey, I'm a filmmaker. Right? That guy isn't the guy that interests me. Yeah. It's the guy sitting there going, why did you do that in that movie? Why does that work and why does that not work? And then you start talking on those levels and that passion comes out. Those people really interest me, and it's at every single level. And I sometimes find myself really fortunate to be surrounded by those people. And I had a great conversation a few days ago with my son Cameron. We were talking, and Cameron is he's a physicist. He's just been accepted, an unconditional acceptance into Glasgow University for theoretical physics. Wow! He works really hard. He was at CERN a couple of years ago.
Jeez Louise!
With his school.
You weren't kidding about him being smarter than you.
Yeah. I mean, really. And
he sounds amazing.
He is amazing, and he's, he works incredibly hard, and I'm really impressed. And this. If you're a father, right, a lot of people listen to this will be a father or a mother or something at one point, and there's a point where you're looking at stuff that this kid is doing. I go, well, it's way beyond, right? And so you're always looking for stuff that you can relate and he loves films, and he loves magic. He loves travel, and we've got the same sense of humor, and he's a really bright kid. And I was just talking to him, called him from here, and I was talking to him on the phone, and we started talking about Studio Ghibli and the animation movies that he's really passionate about.
Okay.
And I've seen a few, and there's a few that I like, and I love this. I love the story of the studio and of the people involved with the studio, and that really interests me. And the films I don't find as intriguing as him until we had this conversation. And here's this guy who's really passionate about the subject and really able to express himself about the subject, and I find myself being inspired to watch more of the movies because he is now putting them into a context I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was intriguing to me that I'm learning from my son.
Yeah.
Right? Really. And I get that. My Connor is the same. Connor is he's a young guy who I could talk about my kids for hours, so can any.
No, go ahead.
But he's a young guy who really is smart and amazingly talented as a musician as well. And he plays guitar, and sometimes it's a problem because he plays all types of guitar, but he plays it loud. And I was brought up. I was when Metallica's first album Kill 'Em All came out. I bought it from John Menzies in the Armadale Centre in Livingston in 1980 something because it had a picture of a hammer and blood on it. I didn't know this band, and it was called Kill 'Em All. So I'm going to buy this. This will piss everybody off when I bring it home, right? So, and I'm a huge Metallica fan now, and I always have been. But I bought it because there was blood and a hammer on the cover. Let's be honest, right? So I know good guitar music, and I'm hearing it coming out of his bedroom, and he is really good. And he did very well at school, and he went to university and out of college, and he was going into university right after. And he did mechanical engineering design, got an A and all that stuff. But as soon as he started the second year, you could tell that this wasn't for him.
Yeah. You
could tell he wasn't. But he's one of those people that really wants to see things through and doesn't like to not see things through. And so it was really interesting to discuss with him because you can't talk him into anything. He's going to do it or he's not going to do it. He knows his own mind. If you don't want to do this, you should do what you want to do and you should figure it out. And he was like, well, I've started the second year. I think I should see it through. And I really was like, wow, this is inspirational, right? I wish I felt that way. But I'm his dad saying, actually, maybe you shouldn't in this case because, if you don't want to do this, you should spend your time doing what you want to do. And not only that, you're at the early stages where it's acceptable. You could bow out now. And he did. And he's now applying for film and television. And he wants to be a filmmaker. And now that he's got that spare time, he's in demand. He's doing internships. He's being paid to work on films. He's an asset on set. So all these local filmmakers, young filmmakers and older filmmakers, are now using him. And he worked on Con Men. He was very important on Con Men. He worked. I found out very quickly that this was a real asset to a film set, not just because he was on Our Magic and was really important in Our Magic. But I found out that this is a really reliable guy, despite the fact he's my kid and everything.
Sure.
But this is someone I can rely upon. And now that he's got spare time, he's being used, and people are trying to get him. He's so conscientious. But when you talk film with him, his understanding of film is so far in advance of what my understanding of film was at that age. And it's really interesting that it's taken me this long to get here. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of almost already knocking on that door at that early an age.
What do you think that is? Because it's kind of what you're speaking to about magic and the youth second dealing on the floor and being 12 years old, and then your son. Do you think that's just the plethora of information at people's fingertips now, or?
Well, there's a definite thing. I've commented on this before. I think we've discussed this before, where the generation ahead of you sets the bar, right? So when I was a kid, there were things that were really, really difficult, and I told you it was difficult. Second dealing, or bottom dealing, or middle dealing, right? But now I've got friends like Jason England who can do all these things brilliantly, and Derek Delgadio, and I'm into these things as well, and we spent all our lives doing it. And we've gotten to this stage, and then we turn around and there's the 12-year-old on the floor doing it, right?
Yeah.
Because he came in, it was normal. There's all these guys doing it. We couldn't see that being done. But now these kids come in and they've got the Steve Forty videos, and they've got the Jason England videos. And,
yeah.
Okay. And they've gotten a head start. They got the information, but they also got the inspiration. They got the example to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how evolution works. Each generation learns from the last and starts slightly further ahead, right? So they don't start from the beginning each time. They start. It's a baton race,
sure.
And every time that baton is passed or taken, right, the next generation advances.
Sure.
There are certain things that go forward and backwards. Reading books. I've said it before. I'll say it again. If you don't read books, you won't be as good a magician as you can be. I think I've said before you won't be a very good magician, but that's not true. You can be a very good magician and never read a book. But imagine how good you would be if you would take that on, because people say it's difficult. It's just a skill. You got to learn it. Yes, watching DVDs seems easier or downloads, but it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back to film for just a second, there's this.
Yeah, we can stay on film.
But I can talk with authority on magic, and with film, I feel I can talk with authority, but that doesn't mean I have authority. That's a different thing.
Okay.
But there's the 24 frames per second
mm-hmm.
projected through a lens.
Mm-hmm.
So there are 24 distinct images being flashed up on that screen.
Yes,
is a different thing to what we're seeing with digital technology. And what happens with that 24 frames per second, and I believe this before, Quentin Tarantino just said it in an interview, but I believe this beforehand. What it does is it engages your brain, and your brain creates that illusion of persistence of vision.
Yep.
And it makes those 24 images become motion.
Mm-hmm.
And it does it in the subconscious, right? But your brain is involved, and therefore you are actively engaged in the image. But when you go to 48 frames per second or 60 frames per second, it becomes more passive. And it starts to influence you rather than you be engaged with it. And there's a difference going on there. And I believe that's similar to the books, right? Mm-hmm. Where when you read a book, you engage with it mentally and you conjure the understanding, right? The information goes in, you process it, and you get the output. And it may not be correct. It may not be exactly correct. And you may come up with something better or worse, yep. But you're involved. Whereas when you watch a guy do a magic trick and give an explanation, you're just getting that information, you're observing the information and then copying it. And that's a different process. And so because I believe very strongly in retaining that 24 frames per second experience, I got nothing against all the other experiences, including 3D, including 48 frames per second. It's all interesting, and maybe we'll hit upon something that's as revolutionary as persistence of vision at 24 frames per second. I just don't think we've done that yet. I don't think we've got the most engaging thing. I think, we're still at the point where that works, and I think it will always work. But maybe someone will come across a 3D technique at 97 frames per second or something that somehow clicks with the brain in a weird way. Mm-hmm. No, we're not there yet. So it's all good and it's all great. I still think I saw Halloween projected on a few weeks ago, and it was terrifying. I've seen that movie 1,000 times. It was terrifying, and all that work that John Carpenter did to psychologically lead the audience and create these terrifying moments are complemented by the illusionary quality of the medium that you're watching it in. And I've seen it on DVD, and I've seen it on, all these different formats. But when you're sitting there and there's one source of light filling your brain, that fucking hell, that's so good. And it is so great, and you took it for granted. We all took it for granted because it was how everything was projected when I saw it, right?
Yeah.
Now it's all on digital screen, and it's still great. But when you go back to it, it's kind of refreshing in a way that I didn't expect. And I believe that books are very much the same. You know, that you need to learn that skill and experience that skill, just like we need to get the new generation into seeing projected 35mm films. And they'll probably sit there first time and go, I don't get it, what was so special about that? But subconsciously it's having a deeper impact. And it's happening more and more. Now we've got the Hateful Eight and, you know, the experience.
It's in vogue right now.
It's in vogue, and I hope that vogue isn't a passing fancy.
Sure. I
hope what it is that, like, you know what, we almost lost it. It almost went away. Kodak almost died, and, you know, Fujifilm. You know, we need to revive those processes, and we need to keep them alive. And I'm very passionate about it right now because that's the project I'm working on now. Is trying to prove that, yeah, we've got no money. We've got a very low budget projected for our next feature, but we've got great imagination. We've got fantastic ideas. I mean, really great ideas. But we want to prove that for a low budget filmmaker like me and my team, film is still an option. And it's still a palette that we can paint from. And its budget means we've got to have our money a little bit more, but not a lot more. I mean, when you think about the entire digital process, you know, there's time and money constraints there too. But with film, it allows us to make some choices that for our particular project are really important in terms of shadows and latitude and making sure that that's absolutely black and stays absolutely black through all the mediums that it will be viewed. And that we will eventually be able to project this, because that's where it came from. It started this entire story, which I won't go into too much because it's not really.
Of course.
But it started with an exhibit in Madrid a few years ago. Maddie Gilbert and I were both there together. And Juan Tamers was performing in a museum exhibit dedicated to Georges Méliès.
Oh, wow.
And so I had the whole place to myself while he was performing. So yes, I let Juan perform while I wandered into the Méliès exhibit. I've seen the show many times. But I had it to myself. And one of the things they kept running for me was the Phantasmagoria Magic Lantern exhibit. And I was sitting there thinking, wow, this is the start of everything, right? And it inspired a notional idea in me that is the heart of the story. So yes, of course, I want to film it on film and I want to project it. And that was that conversation with Alan. I really want to shoot this on film. And, you know, again, expecting him to slap me and go, don't be stupid, we can't afford it, it has to be shot on digital. No, it's like, you're absolutely right, we have to do this on film because it is the medium of the story.
Yeah.
And so to keep that alive and to keep that going is really important right now, because we got to the edge of the cliff and it could have been that there would be no more film. It would be, you know, but thanks to Christopher Nolan, thanks to Tarantino, thanks to Spielberg, thanks to Paul Thomas Anderson, you know, film is not just becoming an aesthetic choice of very advanced, very, you know, masterful filmmakers who are demanding it, and therefore, you know, it's kind of being kept for them. It's available to us. I just saw a film, Mississippi Grind.
I heard about it. I heard it was great.
Yeah, it's really, you know, a strong character piece,
Sure.
and they shot it on film. You know, and that's not a big budget movie. And it was not a tiny budget movie like ours, but it was. That was a choice, and I believe. And you know, I was just with a really great actor, Bruce McGill, and if you don't know who Bruce McGill is, look him up, and you're going to go, I know that guy. He's in everything. Have you ever seen My Cousin Vinny?
Yes.
He's a sheriff in My Cousin Vinny.
Okay.
You know, I Shot the Clerk.
Yeah.
You know, that guy. And he was a really good guy, and I spent a couple of weeks together. And I was asking him about all of his experiences. He's worked with everybody. And the reason he's worked with everybody is because he's a great character actor. And I was asking him, what pisses you off when you're on set? What directors do you like and what do you not like? And, you know, what's the kind of... I'm trying to learn, right? I'm trying to get some... And here's a guy who can tell me about working with everybody. And he told me great stories. And I said, what do you think about working on film? He said, I love it. Everybody's focused. Everything is prepared. You can't, you know... Whereas with digital, it's still great, but there's that feeling of they can keep going. You know, they can just keep going, they can
Yep.
keep rolling. Whereas this thing about film, that it has a focus to it, a bit of a pun, but it has a focus to it.
Sure.
That digital workflow does have, but it just, everybody knows we've got to be on the money on this, and we've got to be ready on this, and when we shot Con Men, we shot it on digital, but I treated it like it was rolls of film, and I had, on every single setup, it was, we just can't keep going and going and going. We've got to, manage this. Now, yes, I was putting everything off to disc as it was being shot, but we tried to respect that feeling of, there's a limited amount of time and there's a limited amount of footage that we can capture. Therefore, we'll imagine that this is a canister of film as we pushed it into the camera. And that really helped. So one of the things I think right now with film and the use of film, and we want to really highlight that with our project, is it's a viable option for all filmmakers. I don't want to always shoot on film. I don't want to always be limited to that. I might want to use this for this. Just an amazing, great film which Roger Deakins shot on Alexa cameras, digital. And it looks astonishing. Sicario. Have you seen Sicario?
No,
it's great, really great. And it looks amazing. It really does look amazing. And so it's possible to do anything. But for that workflow, they were shooting in cities. Film would have put pressure on them that maybe they made the decision this was better. But I like to think it was more, I think this is going to look better for this story, and I think because it's Roger Deakins, I'm sure that was the heart of the decision.
Sure,
right?
sure.
But that relates in a way to books, in magic, and books in general, maybe. In that, yes, we've got downloads, and yes, we've got DVDs, and of course I've done many of those. But we really need to keep a hold of that medium, because that medium creates better magicians and thinkers and creators, because it engages them more. And so if you really want to get better, pick up a book. And if it's hard, it's supposed to be hard. Everything's hard at the beginning. So, I think, I don't know how we got onto this. I really don't, but I'm sure you haven't said anything on this damn podcast.
That's fine.
You could have just mailed me this microphone.
I could
have just sat at home and
It's
babbled.
heavy. I'm sure you have your own microphone.
But I believe that you can be as good as you really want to be at anything. It's really just a matter of putting the work in.
Yeah.
And part of putting the work in is doing the hard stuff. If you want to learn to be a filmmaker, you can just go out and shoot films, and you can just do that. I believe that. But if you really want to be good at it, you've got to learn the hard stuff, and that means you've got to learn why you put the camera where you put it, and you've got to learn why other people made those decisions, and you've got to understand the rules, and then you can break them. And I said I did this little thing called the 13 Paths. You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
It was great.
So one of the things, that was for me, I wrote that for me. I wrote it for me to understand. And most of it works for all forms of creativity. And not even if you agree with it all, if you disagree with it all, it's still good. That's you being creative.
Yeah.
If you disagree with it all and you know why, then that's a very powerful thing. But I set that out mostly for myself. And one of the things was learn the rules and then break them. Otherwise, you're not really, even if you get it right, you're still losing out on an important part of the process. And equally bad, of course, would be to learn the rules and then follow them, without question. Which is kind of a thing, where I'm veering off again. Here we go again.
Let's go.
So here's another thing, right? Formulas.
Yep.
There's a passion for formulas, and there's a passion for lists, right? And rules, and 10 ways to guarantee you can, whatever, or, whatever. There's just, it's all over the internet, it's all over the medium, and people are attracted to it, because 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the best-selling books of all time, and for good reason. It's a good book, right?
Yeah.
However, what tends to happen with formulas and rules is they fall into the hands of non-creative people, and then they become a binding mechanism for them to judge creative people, right? So you get creative people who are then judged by people who've read those rules and says, "Well, the rules say." The people who wrote the rules never intended that, right?
No.
And so beware of formulas. Always beware of formulas. Learn from them, look at them, go, oh, that's interesting. But then keep expanding and thinking and creating. And I think especially now where they're everywhere, you know, if you're a Twitter follower and you follow, you know, Lifehacker is a great account, Twitter account, I follow that. But there's tons of these, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes you read it and it seems blatantly obvious and stupid, but you know, you read it and you go, oh, that's actually quite interesting. But I think there's a real skill that you have to learn of absorbing that stuff and then letting whatever stick, rather than writing it down and trying to do that every day. And then you have to be really careful with that stuff. And I think it's one of the problems with the internet is, first of all, it's driving us all further apart when it was supposed to bring us all together, and I can't fully explain that, but it is. It's isolating us in a way. I don't know why. Even though I can look on Facebook right now, I learned from Facebook today that Jim died, right?
I saw Gary Plant's.
Yeah, I saw that, and I saw it's awful.
I know.
There's a picture of Jim. Oh, and then rest in peace.
Yeah.
So you know, there's that. And then, but the internet is just flooding you with information.
Yes.
And I remember the thrill of it. I was with Danny Garcia. I remember exactly what it was. We were sitting talking about something together, and I know exactly what it was too. And we were sitting in Colorado. It was at the Magic in the Rockies convention. We were at the little restaurant across the street. And by the way, Magic in the Rockies, which I hope they do another one. They didn't do one last year. Is one of the best conventions in America. And if you can get to it, it's fantastic. Really fantastic. But we were there. And this was, I don't know however many years ago it was. We both had iPhones, right? And then probably first generation iPhones. And we were trying to tell each other about something. And he was saying about this this news anchor was on the news. The story was about a wanted rapist, right?
Okay.
And there was a photo fit of the wanted rapist.
And it looked just like...
Looked exactly like the news anchor.
Yeah.
Well, he was explaining that to me. And I was trying to explain to him, a guy who was... if you look for leaping lizards, you might find it, right? And it was a guy on morning TV, a really, you know, a kind of Al Roker-esque, very competent, totally with it and in control morning host who's done this a million times. And the guest is a animal handler who's brought along a couple of lizards, right? One of them is a gecko. And the gecko jumps onto his jacket and sticks to his jacket. And this guy just completely loses all function immediately and falls over. And it's the funniest thing you've ever seen. And I think if you find leaping lizards, you might find it. And anyway, it's one of the fun. And he gets up and immediately recovers and becomes himself. But you know, his TV self and his real get the fuck, and he's doing this. We're trying to describe this to each other.
Yeah.
Me and Danny Garcia.
Yeah.
And we both realize at exactly the same time that we can show this to one another. And we look it up on the internet and we swap phones and we watch. I look at the picture he showed me, which is hilarious and kind of tragic at the same time. And he's looking at the sleeping lizard thing and laughing. And we thought this was fantastic. Mm-hmm. And this is what the internet has become. Now it's on Facebook, right? And you can just show it to the whole world, right? But that's somehow isolating us and separating us. And now you have this amazing amount of information without this growing feeling of knowledge. And don't think, oh, this is an old guy thing talking. It's just I can see it, right? Mm-hmm. I've got a perspective and I can see it. And if you're early teens or you're younger or you're even 20, you might be thinking, well, I don't get this. I don't know what Paul's saying right now. And I don't really fully understand what I'm saying now either, because I'm just starting to notice it. Because I've really embraced it. I've loved it all. But now I'm beginning to think, you know, you go to China. In fact, we're here in Hollywood. You know, yes, everyone's just looking at their phones. Mm-hmm. And there was a point where that was just a kind of crotchety, you know, old man thing to say. Yeah, everyone's on their phones, you know. But actually, I am too, right? And I'm realizing I'm missing so much. And you look around and people are missing so much. And, you know, if you drive with your phone and you're texting while you're driving, seriously go and punch yourself. Do it now, right? Because you're an idiot for doing that. Not an idiot in life. You're an idiot for doing that. I've done it. You've done it.
Yep.
Right? Everybody outside in that room who we know, I said maybe
Sure.
Coley, who's smarter than all of us, right?
Coley will outlive us all.
Yes, I mean, but we've all done it, right?
Yes, yeah.
It's a fucking stupid thing to do, and you will kill yourself or other people, so we have to stop doing it. And so, but that's one of the things that, 10 years ago, if you described this phenomenon of people walking around, you know what I saw today?
What?
I saw a guy on one of those we call them hoverboards, right?
Yeah.
One of those electronic skateboards. No skill required, right? So you stand on that, now you're a skateboarder. And he was going along Hollywood Boulevard with a selfie stick, recording video of himself, doing nothing. Not talking, just doing nothing. And it's in front of his face while he's moving through people. It's stupid, right? It's stupid. And we're in the future, folks. Here we are. But I'm not saying this as a sort of, I'm trying not to be the grumpy old man, because there's nothing helpful about that. I'm just saying that, just like film, right? That thing of film was almost gone, and then we've all realised, actually, we don't want to lose this. This is a great option.
Yeah.
And it does great things. And books, right? It's kind of like, okay, we've all kind of had the thrill of it, and now we've kind of got to the point where we're abusing it to some extent.
We need to rein it in.
We need to rein it in and kind of put it in its place, which is as a useful tool to do all the wonderful things that it does. And I kind of think social media is still waiting to find that, where we kind of use social media more as a glue and less as a wedge, right?
Yeah.
Which is where it is right now. It feels very much like, I hate anonymity online. If you've criticised anybody anonymously, you're a coward.
Yep.
Right? The internet encourages it. It encourages cruelty. People being cruel to one another.
Yes.
That's not helpful. But that's starting to rein back. But that's also gone the other way. Where now that the criticism is over the top, right?
Sure.
But it'll find its place. The pendulum swings from side to side. It finds its place. So how did we get into all of this? What was the question?
What have you been up to? No,
Not much.
I think Apple making the watch speaks to that. The fact that it does take the leaders of industry to move in the direction so that you can just glance at your watch instead of pulling out your phone and driving a wedge between the person in front of you.
You asked me about it earlier. I didn't want the watch. I felt that was an interesting thing when it started. I thought, it's doomed because I don't want one. Because I love all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But a couple of friends got one, Alan Hagen being one of them.
Yeah.
And I asked somebody, I said, well, what's the big deal about the watch? And he says, you know what? You don't take your phone out of your pocket so much. That was it. And immediately I saw a place for it. And it's true, I don't take the phone out of my pocket as much. I glance and I see what the message is. That's a problem, right? That's an interesting problem the watch has introduced to us all, is that I could be talking to you right now and I get a little tap on my wrist, so I look to see who it is, and you're thinking, you got somewhere to go, Paul? You bored? Am I boring you?
Yeah.
Because, history has made that action all about
What's next?
What time is it, or I'm a little bored, or I wonder if I've got to go next. But I'm looking at it now because Alan, the DP we were talking about earlier, is saying, hey, I'm on my way. What are we doing for breakfast tomorrow? I mean, this is the future I'm living in.
Yeah.
My 8-year-old self didn't imagine any of this. Whereas, other 8-year-olds who are now 12 or 15 or 20, or, they grew up with this.
They have one and a hoverboard and a selfie stick.
Yeah, I mean, and the selfie stick and all this
I have to say, those hoverboards are sick. They're so fun.
Well, I haven't been on one yet because I think there's a wait. But I'm not interested in that. That particular thing doesn't interest me.
I wouldn't want one.
Yeah,
but it's nice to play.
I have to say, it'd be nice to kind of just play on one, or maybe if there's a game, like some kind of game that you got on one, you did that and you fell over and had fun. That would be kind of cool. We were talking about people that I think are really interesting and inspirational right now. Alejandro Portel is. He's an interesting guy. I still don't know what the hell he does. Does any of us know what he does?
He is an enigma.
He is an enigma, right? But
he's an unbelievably handsome
enigma.
Yeah, has anybody noticed that he's handsome? I guess some people.
He's
have
ridiculously
noticed.
good.
He is ridiculously good looking, but he's just one of those really encouraging guys. I don't know why. I really liked him when I first met him, and I couldn't. What does he do? That's the other thing too. I don't really do any magic or flourishing, he says, and then he picks a deck of cards up and he's fantastic.
Yeah.
That really, pisses me off. So, but there's lots of these guys around, and there's this interesting thing I wanted to get into, because we mentioned Lauren.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know Lauren?
I do.
You really turned me on to Lauren, I think, because she had written that article,
mm-hmm.
and I agreed with a lot of it. I felt it was too long. I told her I felt it was too long, because you've got great points and you can get them across in another way.
Yep.
But reading it was really interesting, because I'd heard it all before, not quite so well put, to be honest, or so generously put, actually. But she, I think, is part of a growing community that has to not be segregated. Because, female magicians, let's just say female magicians, it's easy to segregate them because there's so fewer of them. And yet, in the last 10 years, as we start to see, Ines Machia, Alexandra Duvivier, and Faye Presto, and there's just so many that you could name, but it gets hard after a while. Ning Kai, she was called Magic Babe Ning for a long time. It was a very marketable name,
yeah.
But she was a more interesting performer and magician and character and personality than a babe, if you ask me. And she certainly was beautiful, but
sure.
And it still is. But there was that thing of what she really sold was this personality, and
mm-hmm.
But you could stand her beside any magician. So the reason I brought this up was there was an interesting thing. I won't name the magician. It was a female magician. Somebody had seen her recently in overseas. And I said, how were they? He said, well, I liked her more than I liked her magic. And I said, this is a completely person.
Sure.
And I said, what was wrong with her magic? Oh, it's wonderful. And it took a moment for it to sink in. And she said, many magicians, it's the other way around. And I thought, wow, talk about, a great lesson in magic. Of course I always want people who like me more than the magic.
Yeah.
That's the point, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's this thing right now where that masochism in magicians thing is mostly an ignorance amongst the male magician community, right? And it is sometimes it's just pure masochism. There's no excuse for it at all. But a lot of it's just unfamiliarity, and it's a new thing.
Misogyny, is that?
Misogyny. Did I say masochism?
Yeah. Is it because we're in the bedroom?
I'm trying to process that. Masochism. Misogyny is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Sadism, masochism.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. In the misogyny. Yeah.
Well, masochism and magic do go well together.
That's true.
I have to say.
That is very true.
I go to conventions and I feel like, why did I do that to myself?
Yes.
But actually, you could make an easy jibe at my expense, and you'd probably be right. But there's this interesting thing. Maybe being involved with male magicians is a form of masochism to some extent, because you're putting up with a very well-known magician who I love dearly as a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him. A friend of mine, she went up and she wanted to buy a trick that you sold, and which she did after that, and she did it perfectly. And he said, "So who's this for?" "Oh, it's for me." "Oh, it's for your boyfriend?" "No, it's for me." "Your husband?" And it was like, oh my God.
Yep.
What the hell? So yeah, masochism. No,
yeah.
It's just coming out. I just can't say it. Misogyny.
Sure. Yeah.
Misogyny. You can edit all that out. I would like you to edit that out. But yeah, the misogyny angle with magicians, I think, has a lot more to do with social issues than it does with magic issues. I don't think it's really about magic. I think it's more about, familiarity of people in this particular art form from all types of things. And I've experienced all sorts of problems in the magic community that are attached to the fact that older generations see things differently to younger generations.
Yeah.
And so we're in this kind of thing. But I kind of think there's this interesting thing happening right now where we're learning, if we're really smart, we're learning from people who are encountering these problems.
Yes.
This is what I wanted to get to. Who are overcoming these problems and kind of shining a light on these problems to the point where those of us who are guilty of it to some extent, we just have to be because we're human beings, are kind of taught through experience to just stop making a big deal of it.
Yeah.
And that's where we're getting to right now with a lot of things. And it's also the same with the youth, in magic and being treated better than they were before.
Mm-hmm.
With the issues that I think Lauren shone a light on very well, I don't really think it's a good thing to turn it into this big deal, right? Because it is a big deal.
Yeah.
I think it's better to do exactly what she did. I said my piece, and I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm loving what I'm doing, and I'm having a great time.
Yeah.
And it was the best thing about the article was that it forced the subject into the light in such a way that it didn't become a difficult topic. That was really the genius of the article, because it came from somebody who's one of us and who's got the same passions as the rest of us.
Yeah.
So that, I think, relates a lot to what we were talking about earlier with the generational thing and the barriers breaking down between the generations, so that it becomes nothing. It just becomes, whoever you are, the whole thing just becomes entirely a meritocracy.
Yes.
A masochistic meritocracy.
It will never not be masochistic.
Yeah, but it has to be done. It has to be addressed. But if you kind of address it and then don't start making, you could easily start saying, I want to keep pointing fingers, or I want to maintain some level of responsibility for past transgressions. You could do that. That's absolutely doable. Yeah. But what's the point?
Yep.
At some point you just kind of have to help people through it. I remember. These are difficult topics because it's so easy to come across as bad, and I think we're all guilty of something. But past generations of racism, for example, is one of those things that you can listen to the way your grandparents used to talk and think,
still talk, right? And
you think, oh my! But can we fix that in their generation?
No.
We can. We could. There's education we could try. Or is it actually quite a good thing that those of us are self-aware enough or socially aware enough to go, oh my God, I can't believe that's what they used to say.
I think it's I think it's good to have that thing to rage against.
Yeah. But I think the next part of that is my kids and their kids saying, I got the tap on the wrist. My kids and their kids no longer seeing the world through those filters.
Yeah.
Right? That's going to take a couple of generations to fix.
There's no automatic question.
Yeah, and I wish I would be alive to see that. Yeah. I don't think if I live to 100 I will see that, because there are people who are fighting to keep that, and it keeps coming back. These awful ways of looking at the world, and you hear it and you see it, and Donald Trump. Oh, by the way, if you're a Donald Trump supporter and I've offended you, good. But this man is a joke. He's an absolute. I hate this. I hate people seeing America through the filter of American politics. That's
awful. My biggest argument against Trump.
Yeah.
Is that every other industrialized democracy in the world views that as a joke, and if he's elected, America's no longer.
But even if he's not elected, the fact he's a contender is appalling.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody's waiting in the wings, letting this all play out so that they come across much better. I'm sure that's the big game plan by somebody, because that man's an idiot, and Americans are not idiots. One of my friends, whenever we get together, we talk, and he's very much a Republican. If I was an American, which I'm not, I would probably be liberal, but middle of the road liberal.
Yeah.
So I'd probably be a Democratic supporter with limits. But I wouldn't, Donald Trump, oh my God. I mean, Trump means fart where I come from. I mean, it does. A Trump is something you do in your underpants. So the fact that he is rallying that kind of support based on that kind of bias is really disturbing. And I'm a British person, so some Americans are listening to this right now going, well, screw you, go back to Britain. We've got the worst problems in Britain. I mean, and historically our crimes are, especially against India and places like that, so historically we've done some awful things, but, we had a party in our election who's very bigoted and got enormous support, UKIP. And, they had these same types of beliefs, and they have the same kind of ridiculous leader, and they got support, and people kept rationalizing their support for these awful people. And, I don't particularly think very much of our leaders either, to be honest. And so I can look at the politicians here and make the same jokes that they make on the Daily Show but trust me, we've got our fair share.
Of course, yeah.
But it shines a light on the fact that those biases still exist. So it's gotten a little bit dark right now, but it really reminds me that, yes, these problems exist. And I think by us discussing them and by allowing it to be discussed so that, even people who feel that way and have expressed those negative qualities can be invited to the positive party.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
That's a good thing. Because it's difficult. I'm trying to be very careful right now so that there's no soundbite someone can pull out and say, listen to what Paul said, and then taken out of context.
Mine will be taken out of context.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, for some reason I said the word masochist, and I'm sure there's some psychologist is going to work that out.
It doesn't matter.
But you've got to be careful in this particular world that we live in right now, because it's so easy to be trying to work it out and then be beaten up with your attempts to reach out.
And then that noise eliminates all.
But what seems to be happening with our community, our direct community that you and I are part of, is that, somebody's went, look, there's a problem, and here it is. I mean, here's what I think about it. But you know what? I still love you guys. Yeah. And I still want to be part of it. And you go, yeah, actually, you know what? Yeah, she's right. And we're right to be part of it. And by doing that, we then begin to witness what's been around us the whole time.
Yep.
And so we'll get through it, and the next generation hopefully won't have to deal with it so much. And I think 2 generations down the line, women who are a minority in magic as magicians will probably always be a minority, just simply because of the way kids gravitate to magic, maybe. But they will be a much bigger part of it. And I remember when we did our magic, and I wanted to ask Tina Leonard about women in magic, and she said, I really don't think it's a thing. I see myself as a magician, and I see myself with all these issues. And some women want to make a big issue out of it, and it's not helpful. And I think the way that it was made an issue through Lauren's misogyny article, not masochism.
People will forget about it if you stop bringing it up.
I can't believe it. I can't believe you let me do it for like 5 minutes before you brought it up. You're just like, I'm going to let this go. I want to see how far this goes.
Well, because I do know that magic is very masochistic. So I
was
maybe.
By the way, it is. It really is.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're going to, it really is a masochistic thing. If you've ever worked with illusions, and I've had to work with illusions in my TV work, and there's a definite aspect of that in that world. But I think there's an interesting thing happening, and it's on this interesting knife edge where somebody could carry it one way or the other. Yeah. Where we're all still riding on the edge and it's still moving towards the positive stuff. And I think that's a good way to go. And it's a good way to go in everything. And it's a good example of how things can change gradually. Because gradual change is what it takes. You can't change it overnight. You can't turn something completely around. I mean, that's not a hard and fast rule. But we're starting to find that it's getting better. And getting better is the way to do it, Yeah. So hopefully You know, I don't know how we got into any of this. You know, this entire thing is. I was going to call it off, to be honest, because I really was upset about Jim today.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, let's just go and talk. And I won't bring Jim up. And of course, that came very, very soon into
I'm
it.
glad it did.
But you know, Jim was one of those old school guys from a previous generation who embraced everything that he was picking up from the new generation, but while still being a bit of a crotchety old man at the same time. He had that in him. But, you know, he was really encouraging. And that's the secret. Is keep encouraging. Encourage up the way, encourage down the way, and, you know, embrace the stuff, even the stuff that kind of makes you roll your eyes and makes you think, oh God, yeah, that's terrible. Okay, what's next? You know, there's this great thing. Somebody, you know, and it was on Facebook, right? So this is great thing that came to me. It's a simple thing. It's nothing special. Which was, you know, we're all different, and that's okay. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's kind of it. That's kind of the lesson that I took into the new year. Almost, you know, was we're all different, and that's okay. So you have to embrace the differences, and you have to accept it. You know, and that's okay. Some differences are not okay, you know, but that's extremes. But if you can do that, then creatively and also in terms of spiritually and in life, all of these things work, and it all comes from what you are and what you do. And you know what I am, as I'm a magician, and what I do is things that give me a feeling of magic. Right now, that's film and photography. I'm really, you know, getting into that again. And I think that the creative juices, the things that make us want to do these things, in addition to the things we have to do, like our day jobs or our, you know, day-to-day responsibilities, which never go away.
Sure.
But they don't define you, right? What defines you is what you actually want to do and what expresses you. And so, you know, I feel sorry. I know people who are nothing more than what they've had to do. It's, you know, get up and go and do a job. I've known people like that. But, you know, when you see people who have that job, it doesn't matter what it is, sweeping the streets or working in a bank, but they're that other thing in their real life. You know, their real life is that, and this is just what they do for a living.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it. I used to be a computer programmer, and I went to work every day, but I'm a magician, and I was a magician then, and I always have been a magician. And it actually helped me be a better computer programmer, as it happened, because of the way I thought. So, all of that stuff, everything I've said, is entirely contradictory with each and every other thing that I said. But that doesn't matter, you know. It's like, yes, the internet has taken us apart, and yet that's that one thing that made me, that, you know, we're all different, but that's okay. Just putting it in that sentence and seeing it in that post was like, that's it. You know, that really connected with me at that time. And, you know, dealing with things is a hard thing in life, but you can be inspired by somebody's story, and you might come to it through the internet, you might come to it through a conversation in the bar, you might come to it over dinner with a friend, or so I can say to you, well, you know, the internet's driving us apart and we're all becoming more isolated by social media. That is true. But that's because as a community, we haven't learned to use it properly yet. We're still, you know, on the hoverboard with the selfie stick, driving through traffic and abusing, you know, overusing it. We're eating too much candy because so much candy's being put in front of us until we're sick, right? And eventually you go, actually, I quite like that, and I'll take a little bit now and then because it's good. And then we'll eventually learn the place for social media and the time for social media and the way that social media works will become more mature within the community so that it becomes more positive. And the negative aspects of it, checking your Facebook while driving a car on the freeway, right? Shit like that. There'll be maybe one generation down the line, they'll think, I can't believe people are so stupid as to do something like that. That's ridiculous. But at the moment, we've kind of been given the car and the keys to the car, and we're still driving it around, you know, like idiots. Eventually, you'll learn how to drive. And so, I think we're at this interesting stage right now, with magic, filmmaking, reading, writing, social media, creativity, being a hipster, any of that stuff. We're at that stuff where we're still trying to make it part of everything and gel, so that it's kind of less pointed and deliberate and more sort of just what we do and how we enjoy and create and express. And there's a very I think there's a very good time coming where we'll all be comfortable, not just with ourselves, which I'm not, never been comfortable with myself and being a social leader, but that's a good thing because it makes me want to do more things. But I think we'll just be comfortable with the way things are in our little bubble and in the bubbles around us, and you won't be threatened by a person because they're better than you at something, or that they're younger than you, or that they're better looking than you. And I have to deal with that because everybody's better looking than me and everyone's younger than me. But there's this point where, I realized how threatened I was at one point. And then you start to realize, I'm here because I listened to this guy and I listened to that person. That person was 70 and that person was 22. And I wasn't conscious of it. Just somewhere I was listening and I was taking it in and not being threatened by it. And so one of the things that when Jim died, that really was the reflection today about how, he was my friend, but he was so much older than me. But he was my really good friend, and we talked like friends do.
Yeah.
And he was older than my parents. So, that is unusual.
Yeah.
And it's one of the great things about magic is when you go through the history of magic, all these great magicians had much older friends.
I think about that all the time.
But here's the way to look at it, and I see it now because I'm, like I said before, I'm in my 40s, right? I see it now. I was always thinking, isn't that amazing? These younger guys had these much older friends. But those older guys had much younger friends. And probably that was very unusual. Outside of the magic community,
I think it still is.
Contemporaries, yeah. But then you look at science, it's the same, Scientists have younger friends and they thrive on that thing. So maybe we're just catching up with other communities. But I think when society is doing that as a rule, where there are no age boundaries, then we'll start getting in there. And of course it's very high in my consciousness right now because, it's easy to be told, you've missed the opportunity or you've missed your boat in anything. As an actor, I could be told, oh, you're too fat, you're too old, or you're too Scottish. Any of those things would bar you. But I've never let that stop me in terms of, I've always thought no, actually, and continued. And as you learn to do no, actually, with everything, then life starts to move on and move forward, and you do stuff, and then you stop and go, actually, when I look back, it was not recognizing barriers that got us to where we are today.
Sure.
So, Jim once told me, how good a friend he thought I was. And that moment is really clear to me. But what's really clear to me that at no point was age a factor in that moment, or considered or anything. Mm-hmm. And the reason it's a factor today is because it's age that has robbed him, or robbed me of him, and all of his friends of him, and of his wife, and he served out his time, and he can't be with us anymore because that's done, and that's the hard part. If you're all your friends are the same age as you, then you'll probably, if you're all very lucky, and I hope you are, you'll all go up to your 80s, and then you'll all start dropping off then. But the hard part of having cross-generational friendships and relationships with people and sharing is that, these guys
you
start
haven't gotten
leaving.
sick of them yet.
Yeah. But these guys start leaving the party, and part of you starts to think, actually, I think I should make sure the party stays going. If I don't try to do it, then who is? Yeah. There's a feeling I've always had, and I really don't want to belabor the point. I don't want to piss anybody off, but Vernon shared with a younger generation, and then that younger generation didn't always share back with the next generation. but they're starting to.
Mm-hmm.
They are doing it to some extent now. And I challenged Bruce Servon on that. I said, don't you feel a responsibility to pass this stuff on? And he said outright no. But then later we would talk about it, and he would start to loosen up a little bit on that. And no is a Bruce's way of just arguing with you directly, right? Because he was a very argumentative guy. And that was good. That was good because it was challenging. But I felt, well, wait a minute, you've got all these secrets, and you've collected them and you've taken them away. Well, what's going to happen when the kids are reinventing them and you're complaining that, oh, that was Vernon's and it was in this, it's in my notes, look. And of course, when he passed on, those notes were passed to the rest of us through L&L, and we have them now. We can read them and we can find all that material. But there is still stuff, there are still lessons and examples, not even the secrets, forget the secrets. Just the example of having a guy like Vernon tell you that you're doing it wrong and that this is why it's right, and you end up with a better sense of taste
mm-hmm.
and a better understanding of, I remember when I was a kid, Gordon Bruce said to me, he said, you do the slight, but you don't understand it. And I remember kind of feeling like that was a put down or something.
Yeah.
But years later, I get it. And it is a big thing. Understanding something is very different to being able to do it or knowing it.
Sure.
They are two very different things. And understanding only comes with experience and time or talent. Sometimes you'll come across a guy who gets it like that. Derek Delgado is a really good example of that. There's a guy who, when he was 14, was way in advance of all of us anyway. But you get that's an unusual thing. For the rest of us, it's more about kind of developing that understanding over time. But the more of those types of guys that come through, the more Vernon was that type of guy. When he was young, he was understanding stuff way before his time, and he became, the hub for all those guys. So I do feel that there's a responsibility to be honest and open, and to be an example, a good one or a bad one, to anybody who wants to look, And so I'm kind of keen that people who should be doing, and I don't necessarily think I'm one of them, but the people that should be making themselves available should be doing it. And I think one person who's doing that exceptionally well is Tamaris.
Yes.
Who, as he's getting older, is trying to find ways to communicate and convey and teach and share, and freed of all the stuff of being a young and hungry and ambitious magician. Now he is Juan Tamaris, and but he's also as enthusiastic today as he ever was, and he's the youngest guy in the room whenever you're with him. He goes longer. He's the one that goes to bed last, right? Always, and his passion and knowledge for things is just mind bending. But he's been building that passion and that knowledge up, and you just can't have it when you're 18. You can't have that much knowledge and that much passion and that much experience and performing ability. But you can have parts of it and be that example, and So I'm trying to make myself available in that way, but at the same time, not entirely convinced that I'm the right guy to do it. I just think that there are people who are. Danny DeOrtiz is another great performer, magician who's, yes, we're making money when we sell DVDs, but when there's a genuine passion to share and improve the people that want to listen, I think there's a difference in the products. There's a real feeling for it there. There's stuff that was put out, even 50 years ago, that was just wasn't trying to let you have all the knowledge. It was trying to hold back a little bit. But then there was stuff, like Kaplan's Art of Magic is a great book because he's really giving you great stuff, and you can tell he knows what he's doing, and it's in every word. Ernest, that guy really understood what he was trying to teach.
Yeah.
So I think right now it's like I really want to do what I want to do, but at the same time I want to be available and also, be honest. It does piss me off when I give something and then it ends up on a free download or it ends up stolen, just because it cheapens it.
Sure.
Not because I want your money. I've given away as much as I've ever earned. If somebody can't afford it, I'd like them to have it. There's that feeling. But there's a real sense of if you want to share stuff, you really want to find somebody who appreciates it, because when they do, it's rewarding for me, it's rewarding for them, and it's really beneficial for creativity and magic and artistry and all the things that come with it. So, and our magic was always about that, was always about trying to give somebody a little bit of a more complex discussion to be part of by watching it and then hopefully thinking about it later than they were getting from the other sources that were readily available. And it's out there now, and people can have it if they want it. So, that seems to be the general gist of everything. It's interesting that, I think we've 2 hours been talking now. This could go on forever.
I'm happy with that.
I mean, I honestly can't imagine anyone getting this far in the podcast.
That's what everybody always says.
But yeah, I can't imagine. If I listen back to what I've been saying, because there's a bag over this microphone. That's one of the cleverest things anybody's ever done, is you put a bag over the microphone. So I'm totally unconscious of it. So, usually when you talk on television or radio, and there's this focus thing that you do where you try and speak in sound bites, so you've got, and there's no time limit here. So if you've gotten this far, Elliott will send you a medal.
I will send you.
Say, where's my medal to Elliott, and he'll draw one on a piece of
tweet
paper.
at me or comment on Instagram.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and my favorite one is almost every episode is way over 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours.
Really?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And I listen all the way through.
Wow.
And it doesn't happen in
Is it masochistic? Should we bring that up again?
It is. It is masochistic.
I
live alone. I don't have any friends. I sit at home and pretend that there are people around.
Yeah, I think there's I think podcasts are interesting. Everything about the internet.
Sure.
It's about giving people ways to express without permission, right? If you want to make a movie, I want to make movies right now.
Yeah.
You got to get people to give you money, and I can't afford that. I mean, I paid for con men, but I did it very creatively. There were shows and stuff, just trying to pay for that. But you got to ask. Somebody's got to go. Okay, I'll give you the money, and nobody's really going to go. All right, I trust you. Now, don't show me a script. Here's the money.
Here you go.
There you go. So there's that process. But what's great about the internet, and podcasts in particular, is you can just...
You give yourself permission.
Give yourself permission. It's relative. Once you got one of these microphones or something, it's relatively inexpensive. And I can say all this because nobody's listening. Right?
We've gone way too
next?
far.
Ricky was funny. Paul's boring.
We'll put Ricky on.
But I think there's something great about it, and it isn't that indicative thing. So to go back to creativity and internet, and the positive thing of the internet is there's this thing where you can, and Cuso's a good example of this. Cuso is doing what he's doing because he doesn't have to have that barrier between him and the objective, right? He can do it and see if it works, and if it works, it works, and he moves to the next stage. And I think this podcast and all podcasts like it are the same thing. 10 years ago we needed a radio station to give us a studio, and by now we would have been kicked out. Right? But it's really exciting, and if you want to make a film, everyone's saying this, and yes, I know I've only done a couple of films, but take my word for it, you can make a film on an iPhone. There's no doubt about it. Forget Tangerine. That was really made by great filmmakers. They really knew what they were doing. I mean, it's not just the fact that they could switch an iPhone on. If you really want to learn to make films, you just take your phone, go out and make films. Cut them for yourself on your laptop. All of that stuff's inexpensive, and there's free versions of everything. And then one day when you've got something good and it goes out there, it'll connect, and boom, you'll have done it. And you didn't have to go through any of the stuff we had to go through. That's what's great about what's happening right now. Embrace that stuff and ignore all the other stuff about, attacking people on Twitter and, saying what's possible and what's not possible. And, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't count. Forget all that. that is really, really exciting. And so, this is the other thing. Whoever's listening to this is, doing it because they want to.
Exactly.
There's no other reason to be here.
Yep.
Right? And I'm here because, I don't know. It's therapy. It feels like it's therapy.
That's what that's what I want.
Yeah, it does. It feels like it's therapy. And it's kind of nice. I was, I don't think I could have mentioned Jim's name at the beginning of this. I think it was really hard, right? But now we can talk about it because, so it is like therapy. And, I can't imagine why on earth anyone would want to listen to it.
It's really interesting. Hilder is the only person that I have done that went over 2 hours. Other than you. And he, at about this time, he was like, it's really interesting talking for this long because you start to say things that you didn't know you knew or thought. Yeah. And then you can kind of solidify it. And he kind of likened it to therapy too.
It is weird. And, part of it's just, it's really odd. There's a point I remember where I was comfortable calling myself a magician. And it took a long time. It really took a long time because I felt just being into magic wasn't enough. And I still agree with that. I still think you're not a magician until you feel like you're ready to say you're a magician and comfortably without being, ashamed of it or in any way, self-loathing about it, right? And I think we had, I had a lot of magicians when we were doing the initial Unreal interviews. I said, have you got any advice? Speaking to the camera. And we've never released that. I should put that out.
Yeah.
And Eric Mead said, be a magician. Don't say you're this or that. Just be comfortable saying you're a magician because it's a great thing to be a magician, right? And right now I feel the same thing about being a filmmaker. I feel like I'm a filmmaker now. I feel like that's what I want to do and I've always wanted to be that. And, I'm not, there's people listening to this who are probably much better and much more experienced in that. But I feel because I like it and I love it and I want to do it. And talking about it just makes me comfortable. I don't feel ashamed to say it anymore. There was a kind of, I'm a filmmaker. Blah, 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 blah. What was that? Sorry? Pardon? What? You're what? Now you feel like,
you kind of proved yourself.
Yeah. And I think if you've never made a film in your life and it's something you really want to do and you feel comfortable saying it, go ahead and say it. And same about magic. If you're, you just picked it up and you did it and your first trick made you, I'm a magician. And if that makes you, if you're totally sure and comfortable about that, you're probably going to be a great magician.
Yeah.
Somewhere down the line. But there is a thing about it when you talk for this long and you just kind of go, oh yeah, that's what I think about that. There's all this great stuff happening. And whenever I think about all the great stuff happening, it's so disjointed. But it does make me think, I'm not really obsessing over the bad stuff that's happening. And that's really positive, and that's really good. And Jim dying is not a bad thing. He had his life, and it was a good thing. But it was bad that he was killed by cancer, and that it was lung cancer, and that he smoked, and all these types of things, and that I didn't know he was on his last couple of weeks or months. But it's a good thing that he was here, and it was a good thing that I remember him the way that I do, and that all of his friends and colleagues and family will remember him more, and that I see only the positive. I have to say I can be a very negative person. I can be very critical of myself, and that's happening less and less. And I think going over this podcast has been mostly about positive stuff.
I think so, definitely.
In the shadow of my friend dying.
Yeah.
That interests me. Because we talked about analysis a minute ago, and I'm starting to analyse what have I babbled about. And it's mostly stuff like that.
It's only been positive.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's because you are being so fulfilled by being able to call yourself a filmmaker and feeling comfortable doing that.
Yeah, and being self-fulfilled is a very important thing, but you never feel completely self-fulfilled. You never feel like... well, some do, I guess. I don't think if you're an artist of any kind, if you're doing anything, you can look at anything and be completely happy with it. That's impossible if you're really an artist.
Sure.
All art is abandoned by the artist. Hopefully abandoned at the right point, just before they do too much or after they've just done enough. But you want to go back to it always. And that's not a good thing. You got to leave it alone when you abandon it. So, but it is fulfilling to have that next thing and to think in life in terms of that. So yeah, I find it interesting that at the moment, looking back on this podcast, everything seems very positive. But I wonder, I'll never listen to this. God knows I would never want to listen to this again. But if that's true, you know how sometimes you think you were positive and then you actually, you were really negative. Maybe that's true. I don't think it is. But if that's true and it's really positive, that's good, because that's a good thing ultimately. In that, the stuff that makes me want to continue doing whatever it is I'm doing is based on actual positive elements. That's really good.
And that's what you share.
Yeah. I mean, a friend of mine, Jason, England, I had been moaning and griping about something or other possibly for days. And he said it. He said, you're being really negative and you're being really critical. You're being really... And I realised that I'd done way too much of that. Not just then, but throughout life. And it's kind of compulsive, when you start getting into gossip or And there's been 2 times in my life where somebody has commented on it and it's had an impact. Once was with Jason and once was with somebody else before who just took me aside and said, don't do that. And really made me go, oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, I should stop doing that. But, we fall back into that. But I think we've had a pretty positive conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was one question. Second question?
Do you want to do the lightning round?
There's a lightning round?
There's a lightning round. That's just what we do at the end.
That was the first question in the lightning round.
That's just what we do at the end. And that just it involves me reading over what I typed out before.
Have I answered anything that you've typed out in all of this?
Most of the things that I typed out, you talked about.
Oh, that's good.
Which is why I was quiet.
That's good.
And also, I just would want to listen to you.
Yeah.
We talked about the magic landscape. We talked about social media and the magic hierarchy.
Right.
That's literally the first 2 things I've written down.
Isn't that interesting? So it's a mentalism routine I'm doing. Right?
We talked a lot about film, which is all the kind of stuff I have down. We talked about cardistry and just the younger generation. I am interested to know one really embarrassing story about Dan and Dave for the people. That'll be like a little treat for the people that made it this long.
Right. Well, my favorite Dan and Dave story is when I first got to know them. There were 2 young guys at the convention. I think this was the first year they were around. It must have been the second year they were around. And it was the A1 Magic Convention in Sacramento. Do you know the story?
No.
You know what's coming?
Maybe.
So they, they were really quiet guys, and they were doing really interesting stuff. I found it interesting. Anyway. So, I liked them, and they would hang around us. And one day, Dave handed me a deck of cards. I took it from him, and it gave me an electric shock. So it was a box that he had bought or jerry-rigged, and he there was a little metal plate underneath, and there was a battery inside. And when you took it, it gave you an electric shock. And I went, okay. And so a couple of days later, one of the big shows was on in the big room, and a guy came out who I knew, older guy. He was walking across the main lobby area of the hotel, and we were sitting on these chairs. And I said to Dave, do me a favour, could you go and do that thing to my friend over there? So he went over. And so we're sitting at the back of the hotel lobby. It was a big lobby. And we're watching, alone in the middle of the floor, is Dave, young Dave, talking to this guy. And the guy's name is most famously known as Arnold Snyder, the Bishop of Blackjack, right? And a very famous publisher of the Blackjack Forum, old school blackjack card counting guy. I mean, a real guy. This is like a big, but he happened to be he's a Magic fan. He happened to be at the Magic Convention, and he is a friend. And they're chatting, and Arnold, who has another name which I mustn't say, so I won't say his other name.
Sure.
His real name. Arnold is chatting to him, and Dave hands him the deck of cards, and Arnold takes the deck of cards and stops. Falls to his knees and collapses. And this guy's in his 50s, I think. And
poor Dave
is in convulsions. And Dave is standing there, rooted, frozen. I run over. So this is all set up.
Sure.
And the plan is for me to run over and say, "Are you?" and to get down and check if he's okay, and to turn to Dave and say, "What have you done?" That's the line.
That's the line.
And I'm halfway across the floor when that big show with all the magicians in it lets out, and now 1,000 people pour into the lobby, including a paramedic who's there, just happens to be at the thing, and they all pour on and they surround him, and I'm there, and this big scene has started. Worst of all, Arnold is keeping it up,
keeping the gag on.
He's still going, and this guy's like, "Call!" I remember him shouting, "Call 911!" This guy shouts,
yeah,
and starts dealing with Arnold, who's having apparently a heart attack on the floor. But I immediately shout, "Don't call 911!" And I'm kicking my friend on the floor. And this guy's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm kicking. And he's like, "That's enough." And so finally he smiles and the whole audience gets it. And then there's like dozens and dozens of people around him. And everyone's laughing. And he gets up and we look around and Dave is gone. He's gone. Completely not there. And he was not there when he got up.
He bolted.
He bolted at some
he
point.
Thought he killed
and
someone.
we saw him. He was in a corridor of the hotel, standing beside a trash can, wiping the fingerprints off of this thing which he was about to throw in the bin. And he had to, so my but that was really good. But my favorite part was they had comment cards at the end of the convention. And so, what did you think? Wiping the fingerprints off. And my favorite part was the comment cards at the convention, which Dave had put. I really enjoyed the convention, but Paul Wilson played a really mean trick on me. So that was my favorite. I think
that's amazing.
Yeah, and there's others, but nothing I wouldn't get sued for.
Okay, and then the last lightning round question is, when was the most recent time you were like punched in the gut, fooled? Can you remember?
Well, I can remember when I was last punched in the gut.
That sounds like a good story.
Yeah, those aren't good stories. The punched in the gut.
I mean, just really blew your mind, fooled. Not like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know.
Juan fools me all the time.
Sure.
And if there's a point where you know what Juan's doing, so. It's like when you're married to a magician. The first time, if you met a magician, male or female, right, and wow, this person's amazing. Then you get to know their timing and like they can't fool you anymore, right?
Yeah.
So there's an element of that with Juan, right, where you can. But then I know I've been watching the routines for years. He's described them to me, and you kind of see him using the toolbox in front of an audience. But when it's directed at you, he's gonna get you. He once said to me, we're going to do some magic. It was a FISM. I'm going to do some magic around the table. Usual thing. I just step back sometimes and let people enjoy it, right? And he said, "Oh no, come and sit there." I'm like, okay, something's coming. So he starts doing total coincidence, which is a routine I do of his. It's the 2 decks. Mm-hmm. No one can do it like Juan, right? Nobody, but it's a great trick. And he starts doing that routine. And it fools everybody like it normally does, but it particularly fools me because I do it and there are 2 shuffles in there that shouldn't be there. And I still don't know how the hell he did it. And it's just, went by everybody else, but I'm just sitting like, how the hell is this happening now? So, that was kind of good. One of my favourite fooled moments was Dean Dell. And he fooled me many times. And again, just like anybody, once he's got his sights on you, he's going to get you. So Dean fooled me absolutely with a ring on string effect, where he set up a book, and the book was always Williamson's Wonders, right? And he would set this up as a barrier, so he would have rubber bands around it, so he could open the book up as a sort of divider. Mm-hmm. And he would stand it up on the table, and he had this piece of string, just coarse string that you get in a hardware store. And he'd cut a big long length, He he'd do gags with it, shorten the ends and all that usual stuff. It was a big long length of string, and he put the ends over the edge of the book so you could see the ends at all time. And he'd tell people on either side, keep your eyes on those ends, make sure they don't leave your sight ever, right? So this isn't Dean's box or one of those things where the ends vanish for a second. They stay there. And you look over the book, so you get everyone to stand up and look over the book. So you can see that string, there's only one piece of string, there's no extras. And then you drop your finger ring over the end of the book, right? And then you watch him, he's behind the book, he does something. And then he starts moving those ends closer to you so that they become longer. And they never leave your sight, and that's a condition of the trick, they never leave your sight. And then he brings it up, and the ring is on the middle of the string, and then he gives you the string and everything to examine. First time he did that, I was just completely blown away. And I happened to be staying quite nearby in Glendale, and I went back to my apartment at the end of the day. And the next day I went in, and I had a thought, maybe it was something like this. And he was doing the trick as I walked in, and you could see his eyes flickered up. That kind of, because that if I'd come in and said do it again, he would not have done it again.
Yeah.
So now I'm in, and I was right, which was but I was really, really fooled, and that was a kind of a gut punch moment. And I recently, not a lot. I mean, I don't really see much that really. It's hard to be fooled, and that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But you're always hoping that somebody will come up and show you something and not tell you immediately how it's done. Maybe they'll tell you eventually. But there is a thing, 40 always fools me when I see it, but then he just shows you right away. And then it's this. Oh God, okay, that's 6 months of my life I'm going to have to, give up to do that. But there's stuff like that. Gut punch fooled is not really...
Doesn't happen much.
No, it doesn't happen much. I think that I love it to happen more, but what I really look forward to is to see magic done so well, and with such respect for itself, which is the thing that we have to bring to it. If you don't respect it, why do you want them to respect it? Really. And I still think, Helder and Derek's show, Nothing to Hide, and Ricky's show, and but Nothing to Hide was just so good. On every level, every single piece those guys did was so well written, it was so conceived, and it was done with such, they didn't give a shit. They just did it, in a way that, I saw it twice and was just thrilled by seeing magic done that well, and with such respect and with such personality, and it was like nobody else could do it like that. I mean, people could rip off those tricks if they wanted to, and they shouldn't. But you couldn't. And and by the way, individually, now that they're working on their own shows, they're a different animal to what they were together. They created something together that was unique, and now we go back to those individual elements, but those individual elements are so good, right? So I get a thrill out of that as much as I get out of being gut punch fooled. And there was a couple of things in that show that got pretty close to fooling me. I used to spend time with Dominic DeVivier, and he would fool the crap out of you with really weird esoteric stuff. I remember he did a trick with a box, and you mailed cards into the box, and at the end of it, I can't even tell you what the effect is now, but the day after it's all I could think of, and he had an amazing triumph where you shuffled everything face up and face down, like really, like you the spectator, and then you put the deck in a black bag, and there's no switch, and you go in and come out, and the deck goes. I still don't know how that's done. And I still don't know how that's done. There's tricks like that, and Matthew B should always fool you, and Danny Doherty's and all. I love it, but it's fleeting. I'm too well read and too long in the tooth to not have something to hold on to a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But I don't. Maybe 10 years ago, if I was fooled, I would feel threatened. That somehow it would reveal something negative in me for not knowing that or whatever. And now I'm just like, great. Well, what is it? And it's this thing that you've always known. Oh, brilliant. Whereas maybe before I thought that's what it was, because I'm human, right? Yeah. So I do love it, but I've always said, magic's great, and I will pay $1,000 for an amazing effect if it's a piece of string and a paper clip, and that's all there is to it. But if it's wonderful. More than an I hate electronic magic, generally speaking. So I'm really gut punch full. No, not very much. And I do look for it. There's a great trick. I'll tell you a great trick that fooled a lot of people. It didn't catch me out because I thought I knew a detail. And it was a guy at Blackpool had a voodoo doll, right? So it was a voodoo doll and a needle. And he turned his back, and you put the needle into the voodoo doll, and then you remove the needle, and then you hit the doll, and he would turn around and tell you what it was. And everybody thought it was electronics. And then so somebody bought it and was doing it in the cafe, and everyone's like, "Well, how much did you pay for that? It must be £500 or like all the electronic stuff is." And the guy who really does it well is Craig Felicetti, because he really seems to understand how to employ it in the way that makes it so that electronics is not an obvious option or even a considered option. Mm-hmm. A lot of people make electronic stuff that just is essentially doing magic the way that lay people always thought we were doing it anyway. You've got a printer in your pocket and it prints the prediction for you. Well, that's what they're doing now. Yeah. Right? But they thought they would. You get the idea. So the guy said, "I got this," and he did it. And so how much was that? You must have spent a lot of money. It's £10. Well, how the hell is it done? It was fooling everybody really badly. And the method, and I'm going to tip the method because you still have to buy it to get the thing. And for £10, you might as well find the guy and buy it. And I don't remember his name, but I'm sure if you look, you might find a version. And the method is great. It's a hypodermic needle, and it's hollow at the end. And I don't even think it's fully hollow, but anyway, the doll is full of different coloured plasticine. Mm-hmm. So when you put the needle into it, and then you put the needle back on the little thing on the table, when I turn around, the point is towards me, and I can see the colour.
Oh, genius!
So that's how it's done. What a genius idea.
Yeah.
This is a magician's podcast, right? So I'm sure I haven't. Just thought maybe leave people listening to this. It was a genius idea. And, it's a great example of how a very simple, clever idea, it's almost childlike, mm-hmm. can be built into something. And, in the hands of the right person will be amazing, there is the electronics, and you go to these conventions and they're so successful because people can do it. They think they can just do it because they bought the product. I remember I was at some FISM last year or something, and these guys were selling the pads where you write on the notepad and it appears in your iPhone. Okay.
Wow.
So somebody's listening to this going, "Well, Paul's giving this away on a podcast." Well, you know what? I saw that exact product today in the Apple store. Bamboo are selling it.
Yep.
And you do notepads, and then your iPhone's got the note exactly. And it looks better than anything we were making for Magic. There are ways of doing this in Magic where someone can take a piece of paper without any surface, write what they need on it, and there is no electronics, there is no peaking, there's no, the thing can even be destroyed, right? Mm-hmm. And the mind reader can divine what that was. Isn't that better than a guy with an iPhone?
Yeah, definitely.
Right? So let's end with that. And I think that, magic, and it's kind of come full circle, because magic methods will come full circle too. Just like film, going back to celluloid, just like, the way that we interact with technology, kind of going back to what we kind of always did, except it becomes part of it rather than the middle of it. We, in terms of magic methods, the original methods, or the methods that were around 100 years ago, are as important and as valuable today as they ever were. And in the hands of new generations who employ them differently and better and sleeker and faster, that's where the innovation will come. So the new stuff comes in, everyone gets excited, and they all buy it. But then it becomes redundant as it becomes well known, right? Mm-hmm. Because it becomes part of everyday society. Magicians have always been trying to be one step ahead of technology. But now technology there's no delay between someone figuring something out and everybody knowing about it and using it. So now magicians have to be cleverer, and the lack of technology, and the obvious, clear lack of technology, is important. and it relates to, in a way, in a kind of twisted way, to the Turk, going back to art magic. This machine is playing chess. Must be a guy doing it. Nope. Here's all of the parts. And by doing that, by making technology the solution, these moving cogs and wheels, and there's clearly nowhere a man could be hiding in there when you see this. The audience is then left with nothing but a magical idea of a machine that can think. Right? And so we have to dismiss, so again it's kind of flipping it on its head, but we have to dismiss technology to make some magic seem feasible. So when you do a trick with your iPhone and somebody says, that's great, can I get that from the App Store? That's not good for magic, it's not good for you, and it's not good for anything. But when you take an iPhone and you do something like, there's things where, you show something on your iPhone and then you make it real by using a little bit of sleight of hand, or, that's not the same thing. That still feels like real magic. And there's a couple of, Greg Rostami's an interesting guy. He makes really interesting, engaging iPhone apps that use technology. But even so, you're like, well, but, you're still in that magical field. So magic is one of those things that always tries to use technology in a very clever way. And sometimes it doesn't use it in a clever way. And I think that's kind of what's happening with that stuff I'm talking about. But then when you see what Felicetti does, and you realize the tools he creates are so powerful, there's a real magician behind that, Craig. There's a real guy who understands it. Whereas some things are just people saying, I can sell this, right? I can sell this if I take it to the thing. What's the point of that? But you put someone who thinks about it, and then the technology is irrelevant, actually, And the same guy can do the same thing in many different ways. So, everything kind of comes full circle. And I think that now we're doing this thing where we've had the thrill of the new, and now that we've kind of realized, well, actually, now that's wearing off, that other stuff is actually still really valuable, and maybe more valuable. And maybe by blending the two, you'll end up with a new, better, more productive thing. Just like when the generations of magic and of creativity in all fields actually communicate together and relate to one another and share, you end up with a very positive, very rewarding community. And I think that the death of Jim Patton and the way I kind of see things happening in my little bubble has all kind of cemented that with me. And I'm really sorry for anybody who's had to listen to it for the last 2 hours. So anyway, I hope there's something in there for somebody. Look, at the end of the day, I just love all of this, and I have to remind myself sometimes that I love all of this, because the bullshit's out there. The negative stuff is out there, and I think just step away from it and enjoy the stuff that you really like. Shine a light on it, as Lauren did with that issue. And rather than, because the reason I brought that up earlier that I didn't say, the thing about that was a really important lesson for me, because I went through some bad stuff with magicians at one point, and I just wanted to leave. I wanted to quit. I wanted to screw these guys, And somebody just came to me and said, you enjoy it, you shouldn't do it. Someone really important. And so I basically stepped away from that part of it and enjoyed the other part of it, and here we are today, right? Whereas what she did, she said, okay, I got a problem with this, and I'm going to deal with it in a really productive way. Didn't run away, didn't, basically throw her toys out of the pram and essentially deprive herself of enjoying what she enjoys. We've all got to do that more and concentrate on the positives and make things better. And it's easy to say, I complain because this is like this and those people like that, and they don't understand, they don't read enough books, and it's easy to complain, and it's compulsive, right? It's easy, so you do more of it. But when you concentrate on the positive stuff and you recognize and learn from the people that have made things better, then everything is more enjoyable, and more fun. And I think that's kind of what I was trying to learn today through the things that happened on the night. As I said earlier, I started my day's been amazing. I'll tell you what, my day's been amazing. Let me leave you with this. I said leave you before. My day's been amazing. I discovered magic at 8 years old. by watching Doug Henning. And on that Doug Henning show was Ricky Jay. And, you know, here we are today, and I love cards, and I love Ricky Jay, and I don't know him at all. But I had breakfast this morning with the guy who helped Doug Henning and designed Illusions for him. Is a really, you know, wonderful, magical, honest genius of a guy who I've always looked up to, and we had breakfast like friends, and I was just, you know, I got a thrill out of that. And then after breakfast with him, I had lunch with Mike Elizalde, who's one of the great magicians of movies and is a really clever magician as a magician, but he's a, you know, I discovered him through Dan and Dave. We went to his place together, and I was sitting there going, you know, you decide all this stuff. You know, I told him when we were talking about practical effects in movies, what my favourite effect was a combination effect of CGI and practical effects that was stunning. And he said, yeah, I did that. And that was a great moment. And, you know, but I had lunch with Mike, and, you know, ostensibly to talk about something I needed his advice on, but we never got to it because, like this damn podcast, right? We just talked about the stuff that interested us. And I came away from that going, I can't believe I get to speak to that guy. I get that thrill. And then after that, I had coffee with Max Maven for 2.5 hours. And I remember my first magic convention, he did a lecture. I never heard of him. This is obviously quite young, but I never heard of Max Maven. I went to this lecture, it was great. And I bought his notes. When I saw him sitting alone in the cafe area, I just wanted so badly to go up to talk to him. I didn't have the guts. I was too... And today, you know, he's a friend, and a really good friend. And I got to have... And then I got to come to Dave and Coley's home because I love these people, and I got to talk to you. And this has been a great day. And after this, I'm going to meet my friend Gianni, who I met at the Magic Castle, who is a movie actor and a producer who's been helping me. And we're going to talk about a script that we've just done. And all of this, and this podcast, which you've had to suffer through for how many hours, this podcast, this therapy session, all of this is because one day I thought, I love magic and I want to learn it.
Yeah.
And I think that whatever you think of whatever I said, or how ridiculously babbling or masochistic this has been, all of this happened because I decided to like magic, even though it was a weird thing to do and it was a strange community to get involved with. But it's led me to where I am now, and all my friends and the people that I like and love who've come to me from this, and my wife, who I met, and the other people I've met, and the kids that I have, and the dog that I've got, all because of magic. And I think anybody who's fortunate in life, who can look back, it's the same thing. It's all come because of music or literature or working in a factory, or just something that bonded everybody, and it's a form of magic, all of it. So all of it comes from this, and so you all probably start listening to me babble on because you like magic or you like whatever. And if you've gotten this far, there's nothing to apologize for in what you like and love in life. And there's going to be a point where you look back and go, wow, because I walked into that magic shop, or I bought that download, or I learned how to do a cardistry move, or I just liked this thing, it'll really suddenly be an important hinge in everything else that's happening in your life. And so I just kind of recognize that. And I think, again, I'm just repeating myself, but today's especially, all these wonderful things I've done today, and at the same time I learned something awful, is kind of weird and kind of difficult to deal with. So we'll stop talking now. I get a little tap on my wrist. So the iWatch is designed to tell you to stand every 50 minutes or something like that. Yeah. And it's gone off several times. So now it's just saying, for God's sake, shut up. So for God's sake, I will shut up.
Thank you so much. This has been the best.
Yeah, we're going to have to re-record this.
Okay.
I can tell. This is just nonsense.
I'll cut it down to a tight 20.
Yeah, if you can cut out any word mention of masochist. Now that I've given you 50 of them to remove.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was weird, wasn't it?
That's okay.
So yeah, I'm glad we did this, and I hope it does well. And
is there anything you want to plug before we end?
nah, I don't really want to plug anything. I think this feels very conversational, and it does feel like there would be something vulgar about doing that. I don't know why.
Okay.
Although I know someone's listening to this going, oh, Jesus, this guy's an asshole. But that person doesn't interest me. But if you're sitting there going, oh, this is kind of interesting, then you're probably our type of people.
Yeah.
And that's good. And there's more and more of us, which is also good. So I think this has been fun.
Well, thank you so much again.
Yeah. Has this been on? Are you sure?
Oh no!